People who are pretty sure they've encountered a serial killer. What happened? Traveling out of state for a vacation with my kids, at a gas station, this one guy starts trying to talk to my young daughter. I immediately got between them, but not before my daughter blurted out exactly where we were going and how long we'd be there. I suddenly felt sick with worry. Something about the guy scared me. I just knew there was going to be a problem. I hustled the kids back to the car and waited to drive away out of fear he might follow us. I didn't see him come out, so eventually I drove off, but I was paranoid about it afterwards. 2 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone banging aggressively on our door. He was screaming that he was there with the security for the complex and that there was an intruder seen in the area, so I was required by law to open the door. Obviously, I didn't fall for that. He started swearing and threatening me. Then he just stopped. Suddenly, something spooked him and he turned and bolted. He'd been standing kind of off to the side and reaching over to bang on the door in a way where I couldn't see his face. When he moved, I saw it. It was the guy from the gas station. He had followed us through 2 states. The actual security of the complex drove around but never found him. There was a broken gate next to the condo that they said he got in through. It scares me so badly when I think about how I was on high alert and still didn't notice him until he was on my doorstep. I ended the trip early and never saw or heard anything else. But my daughter had nightmares about him breaking into our home for years. I was camping with a group of friends and exploring some rock climbing cliffs. The instructions for how to get there weren't great, and we ended up down a road with a farmer stopping us from going any further. Something didn't feel right about the whole encounter, pretending not to know about any landmarks despite clearly being a local, and really insisting that we didn't drive down the road further. We could have murdered our friend ourselves when he said, "Oh yeah, we're just camping at this exact spot here on the map." Even more so when someone pulled up in a van that night to our solo spot and sat in it, engine running, headlights on for 10 minutes. It turned out to be other campers, but my god. Oh, the guy telling the story was my uncle. His manager at the fast food place where he worked in high school invited him and another kid over to his place after work. My uncle and his friend declined and were very glad they did when years later it became public what exactly his former manager, John Wayne, second name Gacy, was doing to and with those other people he invited over. That's not dodging a bullet, that's dodging a frickin' nuke. I'm glad your uncle declined. My grandmother had 3 husbands die of food poisoning accidentally. I don't believe it for a second. Maybe she's just an awful cook. Well, although the latter is possible and morbidly funny, I guess the more probable ones are that it's a sickening, heartbreaking coincidence, or that the original author does indeed have a serial killer in the family. Let's hope that it's sad, sad happenstance. My stepdad was a truck driver, so often we'd visit him at a local truck stop when he was near to grab breakfast and other stuff. My mother is not great. During one of those adventures, my mum decided she wanted us to stay with my stepdad in the truck. Sister was 11, I was 9. During this 2-week period, we were in a random truck stop in Georgia. My sister and I went to go take a shower because we hadn't for days and shared a shower to save on money. I was in and out and waited in the hallway for my sister. A man came up to me and started asking questions. This was happening in the early 2000s, so I'd been taught stranger danger, but also was still being taught to always be respectful to adults. Bullcrap. I was giving him basic answers, but then he was showing me his truck. My tiny self was terrified, but I kept saying, no, I can't. Eventually, he got annoyed and just grabbed my arm and started pulling. In that moment, my sister came out and snatched me back and we ran, crying to tell my mum. I was called overdramatic. If my sister hadn't seen me, I'm positive I would never have been seen again. Oh, I coached the guy's kids' soccer team for years. His kids were fun-loving goofballs that had 2 left feet. He was worried that people would pick on them. Once he stuck around to offer support when we had a parent acting up because the guy was huge. My kids were in his wife's class in elementary school. She was a really nice lady. She left town and no one heard anything from her after he was arrested for attacking working girls. A friend of mine mentioned one of his aunts still has love letters from school that Richard the Night Stalker Ramirez sent to her. It's just so crazy that someone going about their life has no idea that they've encountered a future murderer. I dated Alaskan serial killer Joshua Allen Wade's father for a bit prior to everything coming to light. I've actually been alone in the house with that kid, and that was terrifying after the fact. While I was at university, I worked at a cafe in a local shopping center. Some of our regular customers were a mum and a son who'd come to have breakfast most mornings. The mum was delightful, however the son always seemed a bit off. Nothing major, just you'd say, "Have a great day," and he'd reply with, "Yes." Anyway, one day he comes in without his mum and has his breakfast. The next day, his face is all over the news as he's just been arrested for doing in his poor old mum. So this has actually definitely encountered a serial killer rather than pretty sure. I grew up in a small town in North Wales in the UK. The local cinema had been closed for 15 years, but a guy from out of town had reopened it. As kids, this blew our mind as it was a rural area with very little to offer in terms of entertainment, so it seems unbelievable to us that we'd actually have a cinema in town. On one visit to the cinema, I ended up needing to use the toilet during a film, so I left the theater. I walked through the foyer and into the toilet. There was no paper there, so I went back into the foyer and spoke to the cinema owner to ask if he had any loo roll. I was younger than 10 at the time and very nervous about speaking to adults, but the owner was incredibly kind and friendly and gave me the toilet paper, and we had a conversation about the film and how happy I was that we now had a cinema in our town. I used the toilet and then went back to the theater. A few weeks later, the friendly cinema man was on the front page of every newspaper. He was Peter Moore. My story takes place in Ohio. I paid him to remove a problematic tree that I wasn't confident about cutting down without it dropping on my home. He convinced me to save the tree and just remove a few limbs that were dangerous. He seemed like a nice dude. A month later, he took out everyone in a house except one who he abducted. He stuffed the bodies of the other 3 into the hollow of a tree. When his home was later searched, it was full of piles of leaves and wallpapered to look like trees, and the abducted individual was locked in the basement. Ugh. Well, my guy wasn't when I met him, to be fair. I worked a retail job that sold iPhones at a high-end mall. A guy comes in carrying a Nordstrom bag, wearing Gucci sunglasses, and asks to buy an iPhone. While I waited for our back-of-house team to bring the phone, I was making casual conversation with the guy. I ask what he does for work. He says he's an actor. I ask if he's been in anything I might have seen, and he says, The Hunger Games. I say, cool, who did you play? He mumbles something about being one of the tributes. Conversation somehow leads to him asking if I'm single. I told him I was engaged, and he was visibly annoyed. His attitude got very arrogant after that, and he did a lot of uncomfortable, creepy staring that I noticed after he took off his sunglasses. I'd initially asked him if he was eligible for an upgrade on his phone, and he was confident that he was. Well, after checking his ID, standard protocol, and pulling up the account, nope, not eligible. But his brother's phone was eligible. He insists that he can use his brother's upgrade, but I tell him that stuff like this needs to be approved by the main account holder or another authorized user. So he calls his stepmom and asks to use the brother's upgrade. His stepmom says no, and the guy throws a complete tantrum. Says that his brother is too young for an iPhone anyway, and that he's fine using an older model, that he needs a new phone. Stepmom doesn't budge, yet I'm stuck there for at least 20 minutes while this guy yells at his stepmom, trying desperately to get his way. He leaves in a huff, and I'm so relieved to get away from this entitled jerk. The guy was Elliot Rodger. I've been unable to confirm if he was in any of the movies, but his dad was a producer on the films. I ended up reading his manifesto where he talked about frequenting the mall that I worked at, and how he was also very envious of the actors in the Hunger Games when attending the premiere with his family. I'm assuming he thought that lying about being an actor in the movie would make him sound impressive to me. My uncle was 16 and decided to hitchhike home. A guy pulls over and he gets in. Immediately the guy locks the car doors. As they're going along, this dude driving is getting pretty creepy, saying things like, "We could go to the airport and I'll fly you anywhere you want." My uncle is very freaked out at this point and waits for his moment. He pulls the lock and jumps out at a light and takes off running. He says the guy started following him, but by going through alleys and stuff he was able to shake him off. After he gets home, my grandma could tell something was wrong, so she asked him what happened. He admitted to hitchhiking and told Grandma what the guy had done and said. Grandma got a baseball bat and they drove around town looking for the guy but didn't find him. It wasn't too much later that they arrested him and the story broke. My mum rode her bike over and watched them take the bodies out from down the block, or so she says. In short, my uncle had accepted a ride from John W. Gacy. He wasn't supposed to be hitchhiking, but it was the 70s. At some point he got a bad vibe and jumped out at a red light. When Gacy was arrested, he put 2 and 2 together. And that was our second story about Gacy. I wonder if we'll have any more by the end of this. As someone who just Googled what it was that this guy actually did, I sincerely hope we don't run into him again. Although I guess since most of these people are terrible, I guess that it wouldn't be saving me from too much of the ick factor. My mom once told us about a suspected run-in she had with Clifford Olson. She was about 13 years old, walking home from a swim club, and a man matching his description pulled up alongside her and tried to strike up a conversation. He'd ask her where the post office was located and said he needed some help mailing a present. My mum was smart enough to realize it was Labor Day and the post office was closed. She saw he had plates on his car from the US and had leather gloves on. When she finally worked up the courage to end the conversation and walk away, the man started swearing at her, telling her to get in the car, and then he sped off. The dates and location all add up too. It was freaky stuff. I asked my mom for more information, but she pretty much told me the same story. She ran off the sidewalk into a park across the street to get away from him and didn't stop until she got home. She never reported it to the police, but told my grandparents about the encounter. She wasn't allowed to walk home from the swim club anymore, and the parents set up a carpooling program for the group. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My grandmother. This was in Florida. She told me about how this man came up to her way back in the day saying he was injured and needed help. He was wearing a bright yellow shirt, not related, but I remember her pointing that out to me. She told him that she was really sorry, but she was in a rush to go because she was going to meet her sister to make plans for an upcoming family gathering they'd planned, so she couldn't be of assistance and pointed him in the direction of the nearest doctor's office. And just like that, she left. Turns out the guy was Ted Bundy. She said the look in his eye was the most sinister thing she had ever seen and that she almost helped him, but decided against it at the last minute. My grandmother was an amazing woman. She was always helping people and saw the good in everyone, but she just said he had an evil look in his eye that she couldn't ignore. Robert Lee Yates was an army pilot flying OH-58s while I was flying UH-1s. Same battalion but different company, at Fort Drum, New York. They'd send us down to fly helicopter simulators once a year in Pennsylvania to maintain our instrument ratings. We'd carpool in one vehicle. Bob had a van with shag carpet in the back, so we'd chuck about 5 of us in there during those trips. It was a 4-hour drive, so we'd joke and tell stories to pass the time. I was a fairly new pilot who enjoyed hearing the veteran pilots tell stories. Bob was a CW3 at the time and was a bit odd, but nothing alarming. 18 years later, we saw him on TV being charged with multiple murders of working girls across several states. He had used a Corvette and van for his deeds. Yep, that same van. My grandparents took me on a road trip and stopped in Shreveport to gamble. I sat on a bench and read for hours. It sounds crappy, but my attention span wasn't completely fried at that point, and I was happy to read as long as anyone would let me. Another kid a couple of years younger was in the same situation, but he was not a reader. We started talking and eventually he started telling me about the neighborhood animals he's done awful things to. Cats, dogs, wild animals. He was an equal opportunity monster. He might have just been trying to impress a stranger. He might currently have a crawl space packed with bodies. Who knows? A few months ago, my mother took my son, who was about 6 at the time, to get Santa photos done. A few months later, Toronto police arrested Santa. He had killed several men. He ran a landscaping company and was hiding the bodies in the ground and planting potters of jobs he was doing. Also, working as a mall Santa. Thing that's messed up to me is I'm aware of his actions, but somewhere a family has a photo of their child on his lap, completely unaware, full-fledged serial killer on display. When I was 12 or 13, there was a string of kidnappings and killings in my area. We were told to be very careful. They also gave us a very vague description of the murderer. The very insignificant traits they knew of was that he had a darker complexion and 2 pale scars on his face, on each side of his eyes. One day after school, I took the subway to get to the place where my mother used to work. It's in the edges of the city. It's not a busy area, so the subway wasn't crowded at all. I was waiting for my stop when I noticed a guy sitting 10 meters from me. He was wearing a hoodie, but I could still see part of his face, and one of the things I noticed were 2 pale scars similar to what they'd described. He also had a darker complexion. As soon as I saw that, I immediately stopped looking and I got off at the next stop, trying to look as calm as possible. It was scary because I was close to the age and description of his victims. I'm definitely sure I've had one of these chats because my cousin is one of these. We were quite close before it was revealed to me and the rest of the family that he was a monster, and our last encounter was in September 2020, when he hugged and consoled me at my dad's viewing. His death wasn't related to the cousin. Roughly 6 weeks later, he killed his final victim and was arrested 2 weeks after that. That's when we all found out the truth about him. He also referred to my brother as his little buddy, and they were particularly close, which now makes me so angry because my brother's on the spectrum, as was his final victim. 2 of the others had unspecific learning difficulties. I also set him up with a close friend of mine who fits in his victim pool, but thank God he didn't kill her. I assume it's because that would have been too close to home to get away with. I had an employee that worked for me doing minor maintenance repairs on construction equipment. One day, it just took him way too long on a job and I was angry. I pulled the GPS info and he was nowhere near where he was supposed to be. My admin and I both called him repeatedly with no response. Then I was even more angry because this wasn't the first time he took too long or didn't answer his company-provided Nextel radio. We started digging, find out that it's happened recently. He gets back late and I waited for him alone in my office. I terminated him and he took it surprisingly well. Surprised me because I dealt with a ton of BS as a woman in a male-dominated field and company. A few years later, I was working in a different location for the same company and some cops showed up and wanted to know what I remembered about him. I told them that I fired him. They subpoenaed the GPS records from the company. Then they started finding the rest of the bodies. He broke down and pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He'd been picking up working girls in the company truck, killing them and dumping the bodies in a rural part of the neighboring county. My God, and you, a woman in a male-dominated field, canned him? I'm really glad that you got out of this oblivious, although if you're anything like me, you probably would have needed a bit of a lie down on the floor after hearing about what he had been up to. I once sat in my car at the back of a country lane car park eating pizza in the dark with a friend, no streetlights and just woods surrounding us. Finished up and turned on the headlights and all we could see was a man army crawling towards the car a few meters away. I've never turned on the ignition so fast and sped off in my life. To make it scarier, the guy just slowly got up and looked at us and didn't try to chase or grab the car or anything. Out of all the responses on this thread, yours just made my heart pound. That's terrifying. A guy offered to drive me to an abandoned building to do the deed. He said it was his favorite spot. As romantic as that sounded, I politely declined. My wife, then fiancé, and I were out in Brooklyn one night, reasonably drunk, and hailed a cab to go home. The moment I sat inside, I felt something was wrong. The car seemed more bare bones than a usual taxi, and the driver had a strange affect. There was also a slightly bad smell. The driver was kind of muttering under his breath and making those quiet burps. Every alarm inside of me started going off. I wasn't consciously analyzing it, I just knew it wasn't safe. The guy started driving maybe 10 feet, and when I stopped him and said, "Oh crap, I left my bag in the bar," I grabbed my wife and pulled her out of the cab. The driver started swearing and got unreasonably angry. Instead of, waiting a minute for us to return like a normal driver might, he immediately speeds off down the street. To this day, I'm convinced he was a serial killer or something like that, and that we narrowly avoided disappearing forever into the night. Not exactly a serial killer, but when I was about 7, my sister and I became convinced our neighbor was a serial killer because he was coming and going all hours of the night and constantly had his bathroom light on. My bedroom window had a view of the side of his house, so he wrote all of our evidence on my window with Expo markers. A few weeks after our investigation began, my dad was out front mowing the lawn early in the morning when the neighbor came out and asked him for a cigarette. My dad said he didn't have one, so the neighbor kept walking. A little while later, we heard sirens. There was a man who always walked his little wiener dog around the neighborhood, kind of a local celebrity. He was walking around the apartment complex 2 houses down from us when the neighbor saw him and shanked him to death. The guy never gave a motive aside from mental illness, but my dad's theory is that the neighbor really wanted a cigarette, and we all knew wiener dog guy smoked. So if wiener dog guy said no, that might have caused the neighbor to snap. He was arrested, but I believe he's getting out soon. So while he is a killer, whether or not he's a serial killer is TBD, I guess. My coworkers actually worked with a serial murderer and unspeakable act offender. They said he was quiet but nice, even went out to lunches with them sometimes. When he got arrested, one of them said they had to call the police, it couldn't be him, and that it had to have been a mistake. Nope, there was DNA evidence. To be fair, he did stop his crimes after he started working there. I met the murderer of Grace Millane. Not a serial killer, but on the day he was figuring out how to hide the body. So the night after he killed her, he came into the block of shops I was working at and was looking for a suitcase. He stopped by my store and asked and didn't buy anything, so went to the warehouse next to me. That week I got stopped numerous times going home as the police were looking for a shovel. Eventually finding out the shovel was across from our store at the car wash as he had left it there. I even talked to the employee and was wondering why there was a muddy shovel left at one of his slots. You can see him on videos taking the suitcase into the elevator, which was bought in the store next to mine. The fact that he looked normal, acted normal, and bought all of these things still spooks me. You'd never know. Poor girl. I was at a shopping mall in LA when a man approached me saying he was a casting agent and photographer. Immediately I knew something was off with the guy because that's the #1 scam in the book. But he just gave off such a vibe that I instinctively knew he was very dangerous. I politely took his card and made a mad dash to the H&M and hid in the dressing stalls. I alerted a staff member and they had security walk me to my car. The gift of fear is real, you should trust it. About 2 months later, I had the news on in the background and I saw his face. He'd been arrested for abducting and murdering someone from Michigan. He approached her the same way he did me. Scariest thing ever. I believe there's a new Dateline podcast series about it. I used to work in true crime television, and I can't even listen to the podcast because it freaks me out of how close I was to this guy. As I said above, we have the gift of fear. For a long time, women were taught to be polite and ignore this even if uncomfortable. It's super important to trust your gut, and as MFM says, F politeness. Builders. Did someone ever ask you to make a secret lair for them? I used to do some construction work on schools during the summer. The principal wanted, in his closet, a door to slide up where he could keep a safe for special school records and a mini fridge. Although it wasn't very big or even that cool, it was the coolest work I was ever involved with in that summer. Plus, who wouldn't want a mini fridge hidden in their wall? Electrician here. I've done a few. The coolest was a secret passageway and attached room in a very nice house. It was hidden by a movable bookshelf on both ends. The guy said he didn't have a specific reason for building it, he just always thought it would be cool to have a secret passageway in the house. The other one that stands out was an underground survival bunker accessed through a hidden door in the back of a garage. It had an additional exit by means of an underground tunnel that led almost 100 feet to the bordering forest. The strangest thing about it was that it was a survival bunker that he had us wire with outlets and lights, despite there not being any kind of backup or off-the-grid power. Makes me think that he actually had an alternative purpose for his shelter. Step 1. Build this hidden bunker. Step 2. Sell the house without telling the buyers. Step 3. Live in the bunker, stealing their electricity and small amounts of cash and food. I built a Narnia closet for someone. Their daughter had one request for the new house. She had a built-in armoire, white and modern-looking with nice shelving units on the right side and a bigger opening on the left. However, when you pushed the back of the left closet side, it opened up into an actual closet that was about 5 by 10 feet on the inside and not too shabby at all. It was a pretty fun build, albeit somewhat challenging. Friend of the family works as a custom cabinet maker. Most of his jobs involve him making secret compartments for rich clients. Mainly desks with a secret place that can hide guns, keys, ledgers, and swords. Oddly enough, a lot of people request that. But also stuff in bookshelves, picture frames, among others. He also gets your typical movable bookshelves. Never built one, but I did find one in a house that I was doing some plumbing work in once. This was an expensive condo, and they had a secret office that had a one-way secret mirror looking into the guest shower. Creepy as hell, man. Oh, come on, people. The narrator came here for escapism and to see what other grown-up children with adult incomes built, not for a reminder of how weird and creepy the actual real adults are. Yes, we worked on what was supposedly going to be a hidden, secret walk-in safe in the basement. This room was heavily reinforced. Normally, walls around doors are framed using wood. This door frame was solid reinforced concrete. The room was a square attached to the outside of the basement, so all 4 walls were concrete. We poured concrete above it, so the ceiling was concrete. Very unusual. We also poured the floor. So, it was 6 sides made of concrete. Since it was attached to the outside, there was no sign that it existed from the inside. No ventilation, no wiring from what I saw. I never saw the finished product, but the owner was keeping it a secret and wouldn't explain much about it. So another contractor finished it off. Carpenter. I built a grow room for a guy's medical Mary J in Vermont. An alarm was wired directly to the state police barracks in the event of a burglary. Oh man, yep, all the time. People that can afford it pay a lot for panic rooms and hidden armories, swinging bookcases, doors and wall paneling, you name it. People with that much money usually have something to protect. I had a secret passageway in an old house of mine. From the upstairs bedroom, there was an attic walkway that wraps around the house and has a ladder to a closet in the kitchen. This was done so you can easily fix any of the pipes. But it could also be used as a secret passageway. Definitely used it as a kid to sneak out of the house. But screw that passageway. That thing was always filled with crazy insects. There's a war there that no one ever sees. My parents' house has a, quote, secret room that's behind a bookshelf in their master bedroom. The reason it's put in quotations is because this hidden room is wall-to-wall open window. So basically, you could hide from someone inside of the house, but if they happen to walk around outside, you'd appear to be in a normal room. My dad is a doctor and does a lot of construction at home on his free time. This one time, he was moving a wall, making one room smaller and another bigger. He was putting an entire wall bookshelf kind of thing in the smaller room, and just to mess with future homeowners, he snatched one of those plastic skeletons from his job and hid it in the space between the bookshelf and the wall. I expect headlines sometime in the future. I convinced my brother to add a secret door from one closet to the other closet between his daughter's rooms when we were building his house. I don't know if this fits the criteria, but I know a guy who had no use for a room, so he removed the door and put a fourth wall up. I dare someone to explain this so it doesn't sound like a dumb idea. I think land taxes based on the number of usable or accessible bathrooms in a dwelling? Step 1. Build a quick fake wall. Step 2. Get taxes reassessed. Step 3. Profit. Step 4. Tear down the wall again. I was a draftsman for a while. 2 super wealthy Chinese parents were building all 3 of their children's houses on their massive property. I was asked to design the ironing room for the eldest daughter. She genuinely liked doing ironing? And laundry? I ended up designing this massive room with bay windows overlooking the lake and with all sorts of storage compartments and a variety of ironing stations. She loved it, and I got a healthy bonus. I'm still confused to this day. I just moved into a house that was built in the 70s. The previous owners custom built it, and the architect was the man's old frat buddy. Custom stuff everywhere, with a trash chute straight from the kitchen into the garage wheelie bin. When we first looked at the house, we really loved it, but there was no office space that my husband could use for his music stuff. It was the only disappointing thing about the house, but since everything else was so perfect, we went ahead and put in the offer. When we were doing another walkthrough with our parents, we showed them the walk-up attic, which is pretty cool too. When I turned around to leave, I noticed a wall of insulation that looked different. If you push the insulation to one side, a doorknob appears, and behind it is the secret office. Coolest house ever. I worked for a very wealthy man, and he had hidden rooms and sliding bookcases. When he would need comm equipment in these areas, we'd gain access. Some were built around wiring channels, and we'd find them because the dimensions of the room didn't fit. We'd have to tell his assistant and let her know that we knew, so she could let him know we knew and needed to get access. He had a hidden pistol range, a few safe rooms, and a pretty epic armory tucked away into the 3 properties I had access to. All of the work was top-notch, and unless you knew they were there, it was very difficult to find them. Not a construction worker, but in my old house, one of the bedrooms had a small opening to the crawl space that was made to look like a large mouse hole. I was a custom interior carpenter, and I did 2. One was a bookcase that opened up into a large storage area. The other was a hidden room behind their wine cellar. We installed a custom wine rack on a piano hinge with a latch in the space behind one of the bottles. In the room, they installed a safe and weapon safe. All the electronics for the house lived down there, as well as a panel that opened up into the main living room, in case you wanted to fire at an intruder from the safe room. Booze, weapons, and safety all in one place. I guess what I'm saying is that I know where I'm going when the zombies come. What are these people's lives that they're preparing for this sort of thing? If you have a certain level of wealth, are home invasions just guaranteed or something? Or is it just rich person paranoia? Probably rich person paranoia. My wife and I had a secret soundproof dungeon type room built adjacent to our bedroom. The reason for the room is that we have various devices in there that are impractical to disassemble and put away when we have friends over, or the day we have kids and still want to enjoy our fun discreetly. We had some devices installed when we built the room, such as a large metal cage and other restraining devices. The people who built the room probably asked us 100 times if we were sure we didn't plan to abduct people. The architect nearly dropped the project when I jokingly asked him to make sure there'd be an electric outlet to plug a chainsaw in. I currently live in an ex-grow-op house, and I'm wondering what some signs of hidden rooms would be. The substance-dealing dude that lived here before was a shifty man, and there could be a hidden room in here somewhere. I'm a pool builder, and we were asked to build a hidden pool room for the equipment and other random things, and we had stonemasons turn the whole underneath of the house into a secret room and blended the door into the wall. To open the door, you needed to push a stone, and the door opened automatically. I don't work in construction, but I've always loved building things, and when I was a junior in high school, I decided to remodel the basement I was living in. I intended on building a secret room behind a bookcase because I thought they were cool. It would have been the size of a small closet. However, I got more caught up with more of the actual building process. My basement flooded sometimes, so I tried to figure out a way to make it less of a problem. I decided to elevate the floor slightly by laying a bunch of treated planks across to raise the floor an inch. That took more time than I thought, so by the time I got to my secret room, I blocked the area off but never made the entrance. A few years later, we got some professionals to redo the basement, and they told me they were impressed by my solution for the floors, but didn't say a word when they noticed I'd blocked off an area that could have easily been used. Well, the issue with this question is that the best secret room builders were killed by their employers. I was interning with an advertising agency while at uni, and we went to an audio engineer's place, and in his room was a big piece of circular glass with a few dough lights on behind it. Against the wall was some wines he kept, as the temperature was perfect. Turned out it was the end of a huge tunnel that went far into the Adelaide Hills, as in underground into the hill. It was pretty mind-blowing, I thought. Firefighters have long warned that secret rooms are actually real hazards in emergencies. There was a massive fire in Edinburgh's Old Town a decade or so ago. The buildings were several hundred years old and contained old vaults, rooms, and corridors that had long been forgotten. It allowed the fire to quickly become an inferno. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My house has 2 secret rooms, and there are photos of it in construction, almost finished. It's off to the side of my movie room behind one of 2 black velvet curtains. The main secret room is a huge 20-foot by 9-foot thing, large enough for 5 or more people to escape tornadoes. Ceilings and walls are about 18-inch thick concrete. Also, the ceiling has a steel roof with 10 inches of concrete poured on top of it. All wired, vent and return, internet wired too. Nothing wireless works in the room. We sometimes call it the black hole because the bars on your phone just disappear when you enter. The room is finished now and decorated like the rest of the house. It gives it a less creepy vibe. I once built a whole level of a room that was half the size of the others. It was a half room. I don't know why they wanted a half room, but it wasn't accessible with stairs, and the only way to get there was by stopping the elevator. In the 1970s, a group of Edinburgh students living in a flat in Niddry Street in the city's old town knocked on a wall and heard a hollow sound. Curious and probably drunk, they knocked a hole through it where they exposed an old labyrinth of corridors and rooms underneath North Bridge, nearly half a mile in length. People had lived and died in these rooms underneath the city's bridge. There had been bars and brothels and doss houses for the poor. People in the Victorian times had closed it off, and subsequent generations had forgotten where the entrances were. I've always wanted a secret room that was accessible from underneath a wall next to a swimming pool, so you have your swimming pool and on one side of it is seemingly a wall that goes right to the edge. If you live in the pool, you can swim through a small hole that's near the bottom of it, leading to the secret room. The secret room only has a very small bit of pool that you emerge from, and there are no other entrances or exits, nor windows. Kind of not a secret. In my old flat, I had a room that was locked with a big Yale lock. Whenever we'd have people around, they'd always want to know what was in there, but I never let on. It was my hobby room, so to speak. I used to fix up vintage guitar amps in there, and the lock was there simply because I couldn't trust my drunk friends not to go in there and mess with my stuff. Amps have lethal voltages even when they haven't been used in a while. But I liked the mystique and intrigue whenever people were around. The women were the worst, and their hypotheses were always centered around a secret, dodgy alternative bedroom life. I attended a private boarding school when I was younger. The school itself was more than 200 years old, and the castle it was built around was much older. Upon exploring, me and a few other friends found an entrance to a system of tunnels that ran beneath the school. The tunnels were used as maintenance tunnels for the old heating system that was once run from a gas boiler system. Originally, we thought that was why they were built. We began trying to map out the tunnels and used to spend hours underneath the school during study time and night, roaming around with measuring tape, drawing it to scale. We never completed the map due to the system's enormity. As we got further and further into the tunnels, we learned that these were much older than just the gas boiler. A new cement tunnel network seemed to extend about 1 kilometer in radius. Past 1 kilometer, the tunnels got older and more dangerous. We found they extended all the way out to a pavilion in our school. These passages were also in cement, but were clearly much older. Most of my time as a 14-year-old was spent roaming around them. It gave us passages into locked rooms, the castle's banned grounds, to the forest. We decorated a lot of the walls down there in shoe polish and stolen art paints. We'd even smoked down there a mere few feet below the headmaster's office. Yeah, this billionaire wanted me to install some sort of cave for his bats. I built a dishwasher look-alike that was actually an adult toy compartment. Who am I kidding? I had a dishwasher full of naughty things. I can imagine that this particular disguise may have caused comment for at least one dinner party. Oh, here, let me help you tidy up. No, it's no problem, honestly. Oh my god! Glorious! Goes to show you should never use the dishwasher that's inexplicably in the bedroom. Well, all I'm going to say is that it looks like all of these rooms aren't secrets anymore. My childhood home was built sideways on a hill with a garage lowered about 5 feet from the rest of the house on the downhill side. We had a huge living room that came right up against the edge of the garage, the wall of which formed a low 3-foot wall, above which we had bay windows and a set of steps leading to a deck over the roof of the garage. When I was about 14 or so, I was visiting a friend's house across the street and saw a picture of his grandparents on the wall. It was taken in their front yard in front of their mini gazebo, facing up the street, and off to the side I could see my house. Except, not quite. There was no balcony deck, no huge windows overlooking the street from the living room, and a 2-car garage with a peaked roof abutting the living room. But we only had a 1-car garage. The other half of the garage had somehow disappeared into the rest of the house. I grabbed my friend and we ran back to the house. Right next to the 1-car garage was a brick retaining wall, faced by the stairs up to our front door. That brick wall was where the second garage had been. But clearly, there was no room. It was only about 5 feet high and the living room extended into that space. Still, we bet that it hadn't been filled in. And I vaguely remembered from years ago as a child that there was some sort of storage space into the garage. So we went exploring, and behind some shelves in the back, we found a loose piece of plywood sitting in a groove. We slid it sideways and saw that, yes, the concrete garage floor continued off into the darkness. So we grabbed some flashlights, squeezed in, and found a tiny little disappointing space containing a bunch of wiring panels, circuit breakers, pipes, boxes of junk parts, and spare insulation rolls. It was as long as the other garage was wide, but only about 4 feet wide with a concrete wall on the side facing the front of the house, and short. A bit less than 5 feet, the living room floor was clearly the roof of this cropped-off part of the garage. Our initial hopes of turning it into a fort of some kind were hopeless. It was barely wide enough to sit side by side. We were about to leave, but panning my flashlight over the junk again, I spotted, at the far end of the wall, a door jamb. I scanned the flashlight up to the roof and saw that it led right up to the roof and living room floor, where it had been roughly cut off. So we started moving boxes. Inside the door jamb was a plywood plug held in place by slide bolts. Now, we knew we'd hit the goldmine. We shoved and stacked and pushed the boxes all of the way until we could finally get over and remove the plug. We pulled it out, pushed it to the side, and ducking down, walked into a fully furnished room. Fully, that is, except 5 feet up from the floor, where the walls had been chainsawed off and a roof and floor put in. The remodeling had obviously been done over and around an existing room. There was spilled concrete at the edges of the carpet next to the concrete wall, and some sawdust, but otherwise it was clean and neat. There were even electrical outlets on the 3 finished walls. I snuck out to my room and brought back a lamp. We plugged it into the interior wall near the door, and nothing. We then tried the interior wall facing the garage, and success! The plug was a little bit wiggly and kept falling out, but the outlet in the far back, the front of the house behind what was now a brick retaining wall, worked perfectly. So now we had a room, secret just to ourselves. Still, it was a little weird that it was fully finished, but we eventually figured out that there had probably been 2 stages of remodeling. Someone had turned half the garage into a den first, and then later someone had extended the living room over and through it. But with the lamp on, we realized that things were a little more complicated than that. A rough ladder of 2x4s led up to the ceiling in the corner, and what had looked like finished walls along the garage side were actually floor-to-ceiling cabinets built to fit the space, not chainsawed-off interior walls like in the sidewall. We found canned goods, an old electric heater, light bulbs, which we later found fitted into 2 sockets, one at each end of the room, but only one of which worked, an electric hot plate, toaster, utensils, old plates and cups, and most interestingly to us, an assortment of liquor and old adult magazines. We, paused our investigation for a bit after finding those. Everything down there was a good 20 years or so old, but we'd only moved into the place when I was 6 or so. So we checked out the ladder. It led to a trapdoor of some kind, but we couldn't move it at all. Later, I checked the living room and saw that at some point, the new floor must have been put in over the top. So, though someone at some point had used it as a lair, den, panic room, bomb shelter, who knows? All we knew is that at some point, someone knowingly or not sealed off the living room entrance and left us a treasure trove. So we started using it as our secret fort. We snuck in some old beanbag chairs, the only thing that we could squeeze behind the garage shelves, some sleeping bags, pillows, salvaged couch cushions, comics, and probably tons of other toys and knickknacks that I've forgotten. The secret lasted until the next school year. Though sworn to secrecy, my friend couldn't help but brag that we had a secret fort, and one day brought over 2 other kids to show it to. I relented because one of the kids was cool and, yeah, I kind of wanted to show off. Neither of those 2 kids could keep a secret though, and one day when a group of kids were over, my mum came home early and heard a commotion of loud children, coming not from upstairs at the other end of the house, but from below her feet. She found the place almost immediately, but swore she had known nothing about it. She kicked us out and closed it off, and told me it was off limits until she could talk to my dad about it. In short, when I was 14, I found a hidden partial room in my house, and my dad let me use it as my private fort. When I was 16, I lost my virginity in it, and it was the first place I also got drunk. What is the worst, permanent life decision you've ever made? Trusting a sketchy dentist because he was in the neighborhood and took Medicaid. For every filling he gave us, he drilled out entirely too much healthy tooth, and gave us each 1 root canal. In each of our mouths, the tooth that had root canal treatment completely broke off to the gum, and all the teeth that he had filled ended up breaking. He's since been put out of business and been charged with malpractice. Playing in a band without earplugs. Tinnitus is the worst. I decided to try and be a parkour expert. My crappy coordination didn't kill my motivation until one evening I was at a local park and decided to do a massive wall jump that failed epically. I fell on top of a jagged surface and tore my intestines. Due to this injury, I now have a permanent colostomy at the ripe age of 16. Mistakes, man. They suck. Stretching my ears. One of them is stuck with a 10mm hole that I have to plug in permanently, or else it looks like a cat's puckered butt. A tattoo of my wife's name. She's got mine too. Married for 6 years at the time, blissfully in love. We lasted another 8. Now I just want to chop my arm off. You know, you could chop off hers too, and then swap arms. Problem solved. Missing the party that Bill Gates threw when I was in college before Microsoft took off because I took too much green herb. Oh my god. Rolling the dice and doing the deed unprotected. I have a large birthmark on one side of my face, and when I was about 8 years old, when my father was still alive and we had a decent income, my mother informed me of a simple procedure and asked if I wanted to have said birthmark removed. I said no because it gives me character. As it turns out, that character is a socially awkward hermit who, and I've had a couple of women tell me this, looks like an unspeakable act offender. Well, I'm sorry people said that to you. I don't know what you look like, but I've seen people with large birthmarks on their faces who are still attractive. Chloe Radcliffe springs to mind. That said, making important cosmetic decisions at the age of 8 is a huge ask. Not sure if there was a right way to go about that. Going to med school because it was, in my mind, the next logical step. I didn't take it seriously, and now I'm in $300K of debt, waiting tables, horribly overeducated and underskilled and licensed for everything, living with my parents and trying to figure out what's next. I bought a ring for my downstairs finger to do the deed with my ex. The first and only time I used it, I set the ring size way too small and basically choked my member from a lack of circulating blood. We finished, but the next morning it was shriveled, like half of its normal flaccid size, and it looked like it was covered in really tiny veins everywhere. We went to the ER, and it turns out that I caused ischemia in parts of my Johnson, burst a few blood vessels, and basically destroyed my ability to get rigid for the rest of my life. I'm only in my 20s. This happened 3 years ago, and my ex broke up with me shortly afterwards. I can still get a tiny bit more rigid, maybe 20% of what it was previously if I use a little blue pill. It gets engorged somewhat, but doesn't get up like previously. Dysfunction down there causes a lot of stress, anxiety, worry, no matter what age you are. The worst part was I couldn't really confide in anybody what was the source of my stress. My parents especially could see something was wrong whenever I visited, but I just told them that I was upset because my girlfriend broke up with me. I tried to climb the highest mountain in my country. My father took me and my brother there with some friends. The problem is that I have sickle cell anemia, and due to the low oxygen I just couldn't go further, but I did anyway. Bad idea. My spleen and appendix almost burst, and I had to wait for 24 hours in agonizing pain before a helicopter rescued my butt. Had to get my spleen and appendix removed. Now I can't do any hard exercise ever. In short, tried to climb the highest mountain in my country, lost 2 organs. Marrying a Scottish exotic dancer. I use air quotes because I've spoken to at least 3 different lawyers about addressing the need for a divorce and have easily received 3 different explanations as to whether I am or not actually married. She was here illegally. In a nutshell, we actually did look into getting her citizenship and status to pending, and then eventually a legal green card and all. She just couldn't be bothered with it in the end, I think. It's not like I was making enough money to pay the lawyer to begin the divorce process. I grew up poor, as in family had no car or indoor plumbing for many years, and lived mostly off potatoes and eggs we raised in the backyard. As a teen, I had 1 pair of shoes and 2 pairs of blue jeans to last an entire school year, which were pretty much worn out and patched after a few months. I envied my friends who were better off, and I became a workaholic that held down 3 jobs at the time for most of my 20s and 30s. I bought my first apartment building at age 24, while I myself was living in a ratty 1972 mobile home on rented ground in a sheep farm pasture. I went to college part-time for years as time permitted, paying cash. I'm not wealthy, but I've done okay for myself and have a nice house and live comfortably enough, and finally got married at age 50. If I ever had to do it over again, I would have worked less and partied more when I was younger and made more time for a social life. I regret never taking enough time to search for and find the right one when I was young enough to have kids and a family, instead of settling for comfortable relationships with the few women over the years who showed any interest in me, and raising their kids instead. I would have spent more time traveling the world, getting a better education, explored art more, gone to concerts, drank more beer, owned more animals, and sat around more bonfires. Maybe learned to play an instrument, learned to fly, owned more race cars, volunteered at more charities, gone to more beaches, planted more gardens, and formed more deep friendships with a large, diverse, eclectic group of people. These things are just more important than having money in the bank or a nice house. I think I can drift on this gravel road. I think I can make a hard turn on this road in the rain on a motorcycle. Both of these people regretted their decisions, in case you were wondering. Not wearing my retainer. My dad called me and told me he was dying. He was in hospital with cancer. I asked the nurse if he was, and she said no. Anyway, I tried to get to see him, but my brother had my car, and I couldn't get anyone to take me. And he died late that night alone. If I knew, obviously I would have bussed, walked, hitchhiked, or crawled to that hospital, but I didn't. And 14 years later, I still can't forgive myself, and it haunts me every day. I decided to break up a fight. It was a success at first, but then some guy came from behind and tackled me. I was stronger than him and gave a few good ones, but he was obviously a trained fighter. He put my leg in some kind of jiu-jitsu hold and tore my ACL. I was an uninsured student at the time. 10 years later, I still can't play any sports and I have to be extremely cautious in the snow. The fight I tried to break up turned into a brawl between two groups of people. The school ended up getting involved and kicked 3 people out, including the guy who ruined my knee. Suing did cross my mind, but I wasn't supposed to be at the bar and I was on a full-ride scholarship. I was more worried about my scholarship being taken away. Plus, I was 19, what the frick did I know? This happened in 2001. It doesn't hurt anymore except for during the winter months when it throbs from time to time. Heck, sometimes I forget which knee is injured. I have to be extremely careful when walking on an icy sidewalk. If I slipped and had to regain my balance, my knee would fail me. I plan on upgrading my insurance coverage one of these days to get it fixed. Oof, no good deed goes unpunished, I guess. Sucks for you. You're a special kind of psychopath if you come up to a guy clearly just trying to stop a fight and pull the most damaging long-term injury you can on them. My God. I didn't take brushing or flossing seriously, and now a bunch of my teeth are in pretty bad shape. I stopped wearing my retainer a few months ago, and I'm slowly watching my future dental bills tell me to go F myself. Smoking. I've done irreversible damage to my body, for no reason other than to get a nicotine fix for a problem I created for myself. God, I was stupid. I quit 2 years ago, and I still think I want to smoke on a weekly basis, but I know better. Volunteering to go to war. I didn't even have to go and could have finished my contract out and never gone. I feel like it cost me my sanity and happiness most of the time. Definitely took more out of me than I ever expected it to. Decided to not socialize when I was younger. Didn't go to a 4-year college, and I work full-time. I have no life. It was a very gradual shift over the course of a year from, if I eat a little less and exercise more, to, if I eat absolutely nothing and exercise for 4 to 5 hours a day, that did it to me. The entire time I felt like I was making a conscious, independent choice as I slipped further and further into a mental illness that kills 20% of its sufferers. Now I have a serious heart problem, osteopenia, and people still don't think I'm sick, just in control. I'd have less health problems if I were overweight. My doctors had to let me go once I was a quote, healthy weight, but that didn't help my mental health at all. Every day I struggle with putting the food I need to live into my body. I wouldn't wish this hell on anybody. Lying through my teeth to my high school counselor and saying, I'm okay, when she asked me how I was doing. 4 years of severe depression and many failed college classes later, so many doors in life are now closed to me forever. If you're a young adult reading this, please get the help you need if you need it, today. Okay, update. For those of you wondering, I've recently been accepted to a PhD program in a competitive field studying what I love. You're right, doors never do close forever, they're just harder to open. Tattoos. I love them, but if I could go back, I wouldn't get them. It's a career choice. Fortunately, it's nothing a long-sleeve shirt doesn't cover, but still. I just wish it was more hidden. I have ones on my chest and side that I don't have to worry about at all. Just one on my forearm and one on my bicep. I could have picked a better place for those. To not be there more for my grandparents before they passed. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 20 or so, I was poor. My family was poor, and things got really bad that year. I decided I could make some money flipping stolen items. I was an idiot and got busted. I got a felony for it and 7 years of probation. Now I'm 28, can't get a fricking job anywhere, and life is nearly pointless at this juncture. I've been on the good side of the law since all of that went down, and with each month that passes where I wonder if I'll eat tomorrow or have a roof over my head, I think more and more, I could solve this by getting back into crime. It's a vicious cycle, and I'd rather not be alive than go through all of it again. I have no clue how I'll ever get my fricking life back on track. In short, don't commit crimes when you're desperate. You'll do something stupid and mess your life up forever. And don't ever think that anyone will get it or give 2 screws about you, because they won't. The world will condemn you, crap on you, and then treat you like a worthless, lazy C-word because no one will fricking hire you. Maybe not 100% permanent, but I'm a recent college grad with a degree in film. And while film is my passion, I hate myself every day for being stupid enough to major in film. Buying that World of Warcraft subscription and game in 2004. I got clean in 2009 and never looked back. It was some of the most memorable times I've ever had in a game, but I kept prioritizing it over real life. I think it's helped out a lot of people a lot, but other people regret it with a passion. I think everyone gets nostalgic over it though. Breaking up with that awesome girl in college because I wasn't ready to settle down. I've been trying to find a girl that awesome ever since, or even remotely close. The narrator will say that although it's entirely possible she was and still is an awesome person, rose-tinted nostalgia glasses are probably doing a lot for your image of her. Rest assured that there are people who are as great as her out there. You just have to meet them. Screwing around in high school and not going to college. I'm not saying college is necessary for everyone, but I think I would be in a much better place overall if I had gone. I have a decent corporate job that I am very good at. I've been employed by the same company for 10 years. My life isn't horrible, but the ceiling is getting so low that I have to crouch in my cubicle. I've seen enough advice animal memes on the front page to know that the high school kids are out for summer. If you're reading this, please take my genuine advice. Just tough it out, do well in school, and get a scholarship. Your schoolwork should really be your main focus in life. It'll suck. You might not get to do the things that your friends are doing. I know this. I chose to have fun, and now I don't have much fun at all anymore. I have close friends that are now fresh new lawyers, paramedics on their way to becoming doctors, a Wall Street broker, and even an astrophysicist. I'm already 10 years into a middling career that can't ever really make me happy. I'm not saying that my life is over and this is it for me. I can go to college in my spare time. My employer will even help pay for it. I'm pretty good at taking pictures. I can see a spark there. Maybe something will come of that as well. What I'm saying is, I would have much preferred, in retrospect, if I'd just buckled down, worked hard, and gone to college right after high school when learning was still fresh, and I still remembered a bit about high-level algebra. The ability to learn at the rate you do as a teen does go away. Use it while you have it. Now I'll have to relearn a lot to do schoolwork around a full-time job. In short, San Dimas High School football rules. And I guess I should add to my advice, your mileage may vary. I have a friend that's a welder that did all of his learning as an apprentice. He too makes enough money that he can go and do pretty much whatever he wants to do. At my base salary, after taxes and insurance, the car payment, rent and food, I have to save up for months to be able to swing an in-state vacation. I guess my main point is get the work done while you're really young so that when you're older you don't have to worry about that. And you can do that fun stuff as much as you'd like. I'm not saying wait until you retire to do anything fun, it's just so that you can make enough money to have fun when you're not working. Having a snake as a best friend. My snake, Xavier, looks a lot like me. My buddy Steve used to say he couldn't have picked which one was which out of a lineup, which he ended up having to do several times after the burglaries. But that's all been settled outside of court, and I'm happy to say that the wounds have healed nicely. Anyway, this one time a man on the street came up to me and started cooing while making wild motions with his fists. Immediately concerned, I shook him and asked him what the matter was. "You," he said, his eyeballs bulging and his Adam's apple becoming dislodged. "You did the deed with my wife." Now, I've done the deed with a lot of people's wives, my neighbors, Ronald Reagan's, and yours, but I was pretty sure this man wasn't one of them. For one thing, he was Irish, and the Irish tend to marry Hungarians, and I wouldn't touch a Hungarian for all the money in Hungary, which is about $4.68. For another, he was grotesquely overweight, so I figured his wife couldn't be much to look at either. This might be an unfair judgment, but I've never considered myself a fair individual. In fact, I've never even been to a fair because I don't like Ferris wheels, and I think cotton candy tastes like gonads. "I'll fight you right here," the man said. "Right now." He raised his bony fists and leered at me. At this point, I realized what must have happened. Xavier has been a bit of a man about town recently. He was going through a messy divorce, which for snakes tends to involve repeated chucking up and 400% increase in his doing the deed drive, and it seems likely that it had been he, and not me, who had slept with this man's wife. "Oh," I said, "you're looking for my snake." The next thing I remember, I was waking up in the East Omaha General Custer Memorial Hospital in excruciating pain. My doctor told me that I'd been out for several years, but since the man hit me with such force, I was traveling near the speed of light and I perceived it to only be a few hours, in accordance with Einstein's theory of general relativity. I'd also fractured 34 ribs and needed a mechanical Johnson to replace my old flesh-based one. This saddened me, but I'm delighted to say the wounds have healed up nicely and I am almost a functional human being again. Xavier apologized to me in his own coy way, and our friendship hasn't suffered too much as a result, except for the 2 weeks I used him as a Kleenex brand paper tissue. Not breaking up with my ex-wife while we were in college. One night we were doing laundry and we were right on the verge of breaking up. We almost did it, but I backed down. We ended up getting married and had a couple of kids. My life is screwed because of her now 15 years down the road. But I do have 2 wonderful kids from the relationship that wouldn't have existed if we'd broken up that one night. It's funny how much of my life seems to pivot around that one night and that one decision. Without making the decision, I wouldn't have my kids, but my life wouldn't be screwed. I think about that night so much. I turned down my dream job because of location. Then I ended up getting another job elsewhere that was the right location and a high salary, and those were the worst 5 years of my life. Rocking a backwards, upside-down visor in middle school. I mean, you just sound like a rad dude to me. What are you talking about? I'm gonna rock that look out to the store right now. I wonder if those kids who always laugh at me will be sitting outside again. I wonder what they're laughing at. Oh well. Discovering the internet. Nothing will ever get done again. Choosing a degree for the money, not for what I'm interested in. Now I'm stuck with a major that I don't even like. I don't need to wear protection, I'll just pull out, said 19-year-old me. Despite MTV's efforts to glamorize teenage parents, it really sucks. It's hard trying to raise someone when you yourself don't even have direction in your life. You're already poor, kids are expensive, and you alienate yourself from your friends because no 19 to 21-year-old really wants to hang out with you and your kid on a Friday night. You drop out of school because you can't handle working 40 hours a week and being a parent or trying to be a full-time student or even a part-time student. All this being said, I do love my son to death and he's probably the best thing that happened to me. Without him, I truly believe I would have drunk or partied myself into a really bad place. Took me a lot longer to get back on my feet, but 12 years later, I'm finally back in school and I'm really happy with my life. Letting my tattooist boyfriend do his name on my face has to be one of the worst permanent life decisions anyone's ever made, unless I somehow get the money to magically remove this. Buying a smartphone. Huge frickin' distraction. True dad, I'm writing this answer on my smartphone from work. Crawling out of my mother. If I'd known then what I know of the world today, I would have stayed inside. Mine is inaction. I should have played an extra sport in high school, and I should have created a local non-profit organization for kids with Tourette's, which I have and therefore relate to. If I'd done both of these, I know I could have gotten a full ride to my dream college, which would then have allowed for my 2 brothers and sister to for sure go to college without my parents going so far into debt. Then my parents wouldn't have been so stressed, which would have made home life easier, and my siblings would have had a much easier time in their lives. My inaction took a huge toll on my family. I still regret it to this day, and I wish I could have taken the opportunity to not be lazy, to play an extra sport, go the extra mile, not just sit at home, relax, and expect it all to come to me without lifting a finger. Inaction is just as permanent as action. PhD. There's no going back once you have that level of loan debt. Every teenager should be made to read through these testimonies in their entirety. I've just finished. In short, don't major in arts, don't do substances, go to college, don't get a tattoo, go to the dentist, talk to your counselor, go to college, don't marry an idiot, don't be a stupid freaking kid, go to college. What's a hobby that has a surprising dark side to it? Disney pin collectors. I like pins and I'll buy them when I'm traveling for souvenirs. Apparently, at Disney properties, pin trading is a big thing. And it's also pricey. What at Disney isn't. And there were a bunch that you could only get from random packs. There'd be a set of like 7 to 8 different pins, but you wouldn't know which one you were getting. And they had sets that were well over $100. I'd stopped by one of the kiosks at Disneyland because I wanted a few Star Wars pins, and I saw people trading pins with the employees. I was curious about it, so I googled a bit and was amazed by the black and grey market of pin trading. People would buy knockoffs and then go to the parks and trade them to staff or other patrons, even kids, for legit pins. Or they'd find someone with a rare or valuable pin that didn't know its worth, and they'd try to rip them off. I guess with obsession comes darkness. Beekeeping. There are keepers who weaponized severe illnesses against others' hives and many cases of hive theft every year. I'm not sure if it's still a thing, but when I played Magic the Gathering a number of years ago, I heard some real horror stories about how competitive Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh players were. One story involved a guy at Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments holding a weapon under the table to scare an opponent into losing. Wasn't there one Yu-Gi-Oh card that got banned in competitions because it was making people show up smelling like absolute crap? Yeah, that card had a line on it about the players shaking hands, and if you shook hands, you'd get a beneficial effect. So people would choose to not bathe or just deliberately smell terrible so that their opponents, while they might want that beneficial effect, would resist because they don't want to touch the other player's hand or be near them. It kinda reminds me that Super Smash Bros. Tournaments, when held in person, actually have to put in rules about competitors having to bathe, since some of them were really unhygienic, nasty fools. And it was such a common problem that they had to make a tournament rule about it for some tournaments that people ran. As a fellow nerd, I do hate to call out my card-playing brethren, but I do have to say that when I go to my local hobby store to buy things that I don't need and can't afford, there have been some rank-smelling Magic the Gathering tournaments there. So I completely buy high-level tournaments in nerdy things having bathing rules. Stamp collecting. Some places won't mint stamps of a living person, so major collectors are just waiting for certain people to die so they can complete sets or have special commemorative sets made. Find a serious stamp collector who's also an avid Beatles fan, and you'll see what I mean. What does the Venn diagram between philatelist Beatles fans and people who buy into the Paul is dead theory look like? I bet that's an interesting, super freaking obscure argument that's happened somewhere on the internet before. Macrophotography has a whole ethical debate about euthanizing insects to be photographed. Wine collecting. There's rampant forgery. If you haven't watched Sour Grapes on Netflix, I highly recommend that you do. Genealogy. You can uncover some family secrets that you really might never want to know. Some cousin marriages, some affairs. Once I found a birth certificate for a doorstep baby. I hope that baby and the mother found their peace in life. My paternal grandparents were cousins. Grandfather was a letter carrier who got caught stealing mail. This was in the 1910s, so mailing cash was common, and he did federal time. His father, my great-grandfather, couldn't find work after his Civil War service and became a boarding house thief who was caught stealing clothing and stuff from other people's rooms. He was apprehended with a list of over 50 boarding houses in Philadelphia among his possessions. His wife, my great-grandmother, ran off with his brother's son. But I can report my father and his 5 siblings were all honorable people. Egg collecting. Some people go nuts and end up stealing eggs from nests of endangered birds. Some go to jail. Ornithology, also known as birdwatching. I've been in shouting matches with other ornithologists over territory and high-frequency spots. They'll also use fake bird calls to scare birds away. One fellow left a bloody feather for me in a spot that I frequent. I've prepared a sharpened quill for the next encounter. Wild ginseng hunting in rural Appalachia. The mountain gold roots are highly valuable and illegal harvesting is a big business. There's lots of shady and armed characters traipsing around the woods to find the stuff. It's the same with succulent collectors, by which I mean poachers, in Southern California, and orchid hunters in the Everglades National Park. Also, didn't someone steal the last remaining specimen of a certain plant, I think a water lily, from Kew Gardens a few years ago? I remember a BBC News interview with one of Kew's lead horticulturalists, and you could hear that he was absolutely gutted. I suspect people with no experience assume that hobby store-style group activities like tabletop miniature games, Pokemon, are just silly fun for nerds and kids. But the amount of drama, anger, and bullcrap going on in those places as personalities clash is off the charts. I've heard stories ranging from stalking to attacks to death threats, and that's just the normal side of how crazy it gets. Drum corps. Some corps will literally push you past your breaking point. Some people end up getting stress fractures or worse and are told to push through them. My favorite is knitting and crochet. Do you make a baby blanket out of wool and risk the child having an allergic reaction, or do you make it out of synthetic fibers and have the blanket melt onto the child should a fire happen? Either choice means you're a demon and hate all children, according to some enthusiasts on the internet. Plant collecting. People poach them from nature, steal them from nurseries, conservatories, and homes, file fake claims against the sellers to get their money back, paint plants to look like a different species, flip plants without proper quarantine and acclimation, and also sell infected plants, be it bugs, rot, mosaic virus, among other things. Honestly, it's shocking how many awful things can go wrong with collecting plants. Quilting. Gossip around people with a fabric habit can be quite mean. Manhole cover enthusiasts. I found them while working on a school project, and there are some sophisticated thieves in that community. Doll collecting. Fakes are a big business, and people are crazy. The fake American Girl dolls always make me laugh. They can never get the lip color right, and they always end up looking like adult movie stars. Absolutely. You know it's wild when a doll can get cancelled. Thank goodness dolls aren't sentient because the scrutiny and judgment they get from fans is hardcore. And I say that as a huge fan who also thinks Mattel has turned Barbie into a cheap piece of crap in the past 10 years. Don't even get me started. Improv is full of predatory folk. I mean, just about any performing art is full of predators. Computer security. You start out with some naive idea about maybe fixing a bug you found in some software, and slowly become aware of an aggressively boring world consisting of multi-million-dollar lawsuits, secretive organizations, politics, and international crime. It's good fun when you can ignore all of that and fix some bugs or write a neat program, though. Astronomy and stargazing. People will drive for hours just to get a dark sky with minimal or no light pollution, and light pollution is getting worse and more widespread every year. You know, I can't help but feel like you're not reading this question in the spirit it's meant to be interpreted in, but I do applaud you for your creative take on it. Well done. I don't know about a dark side to it as a hobby, but music. Great hobby, awesome creative outlet, but professional music and music academia is toxic. Expecting students to work for more than 12 hours a day, constantly being compared to others in negative ways, the massive substance use culture that surrounds music students. I don't know any music student that wasn't at least taking Adderall to study, if not white snow or other substances at times too. And professional music, at least professional orchestras and big bands, require such talent that you basically just have to practice non-stop for decades to get into them. Which you learned how to do in music school. You just pop some pills, do nothing but play your instrument, and have no life. It's getting better in a lot of schools and for a lot of people, thankfully. I absolutely agree. The culture is absolutely draining, and everyone treats you like a failure if you aren't constantly practicing. Everyone is super cutthroat, and eventually I hit a wall. Being an already fairly unstable ADHD and depressed, anxious kid all around, there is literally no way you can just explain away all these college students taking 8+ classes, on top of ensembles, concerts, practicing lessons, and even observations and workshops, as healthy or constructive. When I got physically injured and my school still expected me to be giving 120%, that's when I had to bail. Super toxic and exclusive crowd that I just really put up with for a love of the craft. Ham radio has a fair number of racist jerks and outright crazy people. The AmITheA band is like the 4chan of the airwaves sometimes. Classical music. I worked in a store that sold mostly classical records, and a lot of the hardcore fans were incredibly pushy and nasty, especially opera fans. And the whole world of classical performance is chock full of downright bullying behavior, obsession, and general craziness. Lego. It's a kid's toy, right? Wrong. We have a chronic problem where new releases sell out almost immediately, going for vastly marked up prices while being unavailable to the public for months on end. Also, the Lego Group treats product leaks like murder cases, surgically ferreting out the responsible party. It's the Marvel's Hitman joke. And don't even get me started on the figure market. This is a relatively new creation since COVID got a lot of adult fans into the hobby and searching for rare and nostalgic figures. Cue a bunch of absolute idiots going on eBay and buying specific figures in bulk because they think they're the new Wall Street bets. They'll coordinate their attacks, going after somewhat rare but not impossible to find figures like Bail Organa or Captain Rex, and sending the prices to the moon. This problem is uniquely pernicious to the LEGO Star Wars community, by the way, which has several very nasty influencers in it. Captain Rex is not a genuinely rare figure. He was in one set, yeah, but it was a cheap, mass-produced set that a lot of people have. His price should be somewhere around $35 to $40, like Grand Admiral Thrawn was before a certain M+R character brought a bajillion. Instead, both Rex and Thrawn can go for upwards of $100. It's frickin' mental. They've totally messed up the third-party market, treating it like a damned stocks game when all the general public wants is some cool toys. The LEGO Instagram and YouTube communities are absolutely terrible. Surprisingly, the Reddits aren't though, with the exception of the sales ones, predictably, which have very strict guidelines but still fall prey to drama around counterfeiting and catfishing. Pokémon Go. There are fights over gyms and PvP battles, mainly gyms. I think a couple of people have actually died over them. I'm gonna say that model train fans are constantly daydreaming about tying someone to those tracks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't know if this is really surprising, but bodybuilding. Weight training and dieting is a great habit that I'd recommend to every young man. But every bodybuilder big enough to make it into magazines or even get big on Instagram is definitely using substances and PEDs. Young guys get into them just to keep up. The endocrine system is very delicate and complex, and guys in their early 20s or younger are just totally winging it by themselves with hormones bought online from China with Bitcoin. Best practice is to not try them unless you're prepared to be on it for your entire life because your natural testosterone levels will never recover if you pin for long enough. That's a huge frickin' commitment for a young guy who likes lifting to make. I'm struggling to remember the name of the weight loss drug which is super effective to lose fat, but it's incredibly hard on your body and even a small overdose can result in death through overheating. This stuff is really serious and every young man who gets into it has to make a choice between becoming physically dependent on powerful, illegal substances and never measuring up to his idols. Endurance tickling. They got young men to get tied down to see who could withstand being tickled the longest as a competition, but then they uploaded it to adult sites for people to gratify themselves to. There was a great documentary about it called Tickled, and honestly, it's nuts. There's blackmail, death threats, stolen identities, the Secret Service shows up for a hot minute. I 100% recommend it. Best documentary and a total rollercoaster. Knitting. That's black magic right there. How can one piece of yarn turn into a hat? It's just not possible. I don't knit, I crochet, and I can certify that I'm totally a witch who sold her soul to the devil just so that I could transform one piece of yarn into a hat. It's amazing how many weapons are faked. Paratrooper M1A1 carbine? Likely a fake. Almost anything from the Third Reich is faked. Navy Lugers? Faked. The Singer Sewing Machine Company made about 500 M1911 pistols. Only about 150 survive. Winchester M97 trench weapons are faked. Snipers of almost any origin are also fakes. I could go on, but you have to have a very discerning eye if you want to be a collector of high-end antique weapons like this. I'm willing to put money on everyone who collects salt and pepper shakers having a body buried somewhere. Old ladies will throw down with a motherfricker for salt and pepper shakers. At my former job, we had shaker sets that were exclusive to certain holidays. For Thanksgiving, we had these cute little turkey sets, and every grandma that set foot in the store tried to go home with one. Due to their popularity, we were running low on turkey shakers every goddamn week. I had to calm down disgruntled old ladies who didn't get any and somehow make more magically appear so they didn't skin me alive. It was rough. It's very common for old people to steal Cracker Barrel salt and pepper shakers. A lot of retirees will visit every Cracker Barrel in the nation and steal the salt and pepper shaker as a collection. My wife worked there for a number of years in high school and loved catching old people trying to steal the salt and pepper shakers, especially if they were rather nasty customers. This new world of shaker espionage and smuggling is something that's completely breezed the narrator by in his hospitality life. I don't think anyone stole the S&P at my restaurant in the past, and we were old lady central. It does seem like something some of the more venomous harridans would do, though. The sweet ones? Definitely not. Writing a fanfiction? People can obsess over characters and have unhealthy attachments to them. Depending on the person, their real-life problems and personality might start to get written into their stories, which they can turn into any sort of fantasy. I just want to write a Star Wars sequel rewrite, man. To be fair, writing one's real-life problems into a fanfiction is an excellent way to heal for many people who've experienced traumatic events, as it gives them a safe, controlled space in which to confront their problems. The real dark side of fanfic, and fandom in general, in my opinion, is the people who take things way too far and attack others because they said something about a character, or they support a different fan theory, or... It goes on, and it's frankly quite sickening. Playing drums. It's not a dark side per se, but people always underestimate the damage it can do to your hearing and fingers, which is nothing worse than blisters and calluses in my experience, but ear protection is more than necessary. Medieval hobbyists. SCA, HEMA, even more academically oriented, officially historically focused groups like Medieval Academy of America, the Renaissance Society, among others. What at first looks to be a fun excuse to go camping in funny clothes and drink a lot of homebrew and play Battle with friends, often turns out to harbor a lot of folks who are into white or Euro supremacy, religious fundamentalist, or militaristic and authoritarian mindsets. It seems they're all lured in by an idealized, mythologized societal peak that they falsely believe existed in their respective self-identification subcultures. The intersections of these different groups on their own, let alone how often they overlap with the other artists, performers, costumers, fantasists, renfolk, romantics, and academics that make up another portion of the memberships, can make for some very interesting social dynamics. I was with a woman who was into this. She got more and more obsessed, and then eventually quit her good job to make medieval dress-up clothes for herself full-time. She went on to more and more events without me, and by the time we broke up, I was barely seeing her. A lot of marriages have broken down like this. There's an insane amount of SCA drama going on 24/7, and they eventually focus on that all the time to the expense of the real world. On a similar note, this isn't shocking, but I've heard from friends that Civil War reenacting can get pretty toxic. Obviously, you've got the whole revisionist sect who want to glorify Confederates and human traders, but there's also a lot of angry, obsessive old men who'll throw a fit if your Union cavalry uniform doesn't have the right number of buttons and the perfect thread count. There was also that one time someone bought a real sword and hit someone in the face on horseback. Magic the Gathering. You'd be amazed at how many 400-pound good guys there are. I don't know for sure, but I always assume people that are super into model trains are sociopaths. Yes, as a train enthusiast, there are two types. The folks that put a cute train around the Christmas tree and don't really care about what it is, and the people who get upset that their N scale, that's 1 in 160 for you lay people, SD40 Mac 2DH AC130cc PRR number 4269 from Broadway Limited, has 6 more rivets than the actual one, and the headlight is the wrong shade of white, and they spend the entire run session complaining to everyone in earshot about it. I just want to run my little trains in peace, Jim. Tabletop role-playing. We have tons of guys that like weird stuff. I believe the question specified surprising. This isn't surprising. The worst part of role-playing games is the people that play role-playing games. That's why you get into it with your friends and only branch out with other friends and never engage with the hobby scene at all. Matchbox or similar car collectors. They're even weirder than fanatic model train people since they're after that one rare or defective piece out of a run of hundreds of thousands. I worked in a hobby shop years ago in the 1970s, and they were just weird. Like Jeffrey Dahmer weird. Creeped me the F out, but you had to help them out since that was the job. Years later, I was in a hotel in the Metro Chicago area for work, and they were having a Matchbox collectors convention. They were still just as creepy all those years later. I like to collect Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars. I usually just like to stick with trucks and muscle cars, and special ones based on movie or TV cars. I try not to take it too seriously, just finding ones that really appeal to me instead of the treasure hunts and red lines. But I hear about collectors who work at Walmart and other places that hoard all of the good ones that come in off the truck. I collect a few different kinds of toys for nostalgia, and let me tell you, adult toy collectors can be terrible, entitled brats. Contrary to what they believe, adults are not the target demographic. The companies are catering to children. Stop attacking them on social media. Stop bullying literal children about it. Scalping can be a huge issue as well. People would buy whole shelves of things just to resell at a markup. Adults who aren't into it sometimes assume the worst of you, and the worst varies. I'm just an adult who spends some of their fun money on cute, colorful things. Sometimes you're just trying to make friends and you stumble into a kink community. People can do what they like as long as it's safe, sane, and consensual, but you can really get ambushed by it or have it pushed on you. The most frequent kink grosses me out, actually, and I really have to watch who I interact with. Alternate photography. Vaporized mercury, cyanide, silver nitrate. For wet plate, there are some good substitutes, but you still really have to know what you're dealing with. Bug collecting for display purposes. If it's for study, I understand completely. Just to collect them and say that you have them? That's pretty creepy. However, if bugs totally are your thing, check out May's Natural History Museum. The collection is expansive and there's a few extinct species included, but the spiders made me run out of there. Pink Floyd album listening. As a Pink Floyd fan, I've learned even a lot of Pink Floyd fans don't like each other. I went to see Brit Floyd, one of the best Pink Floyd tribute bands out there, and I got stuck sitting next to a guy that was like the comic book guy from The Simpsons. He tried to turn what I thought was a casual conversation into a game of Trivial Pursuit. Dungeons and Dragons. Why? Because you're going to want to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on books, figurines, dice, and various other wastes of money. At 55, I'd already spent a few $100 on books and dice, and it's gotten worse. For real though, I had to stop playing D&D in college because nearly every session there were multiple people role-playing substance use and working girls to the point of it being uncomfortable. Biking tends to get a pass for being environmentally friendly, however carbon fiber bike frames at the end of their lives can still sit in a landfill. That being said, I love biking. Hiking is another one of those hobbies that gets a free pass for being environmentally friendly despite being bad for green spaces. Many more people than the community would like to admit are bad at the whole leave no trace policy and don't follow the best practices when dealing with wildlife. More directly related is the amount of goods that end up in the landfill. Dyneema is really bad because while it's really light and good for carrying, it doesn't last longer than a couple of seasons of heavy use. Ultralight backpacking has really screwed with the environmentally friendly aspect of hiking, as the trade-off for lighter gear is usually durability. Truffle hunting. My professor used to talk about how he knew guys that would get murdered just because of truffles, or how if you find a good way to grow a mushroom like the morel in a farm, people would get attacked over that as well. What dumb moment made you break up with your hot significant other? She thought that Canada was in the middle of the United States, right next to Colorado. I wonder if she heard something about Wyoming being Colorado's Canada and it stuck with her. That day we got into a fight on whether or not rabbits lay eggs. They don't lay eggs, Katie. Easter is a lie. Go read a book. Legitimately thought that birds didn't have brains and that they would fly into her if she didn't move. It made it difficult to spend time together outdoors. She thought the hot, unbearable weather was caused by wildfires in Florida. We live in California. Other things she said included, but weren't limited to, if we have a power outage, will my car turn on? Visiting Japan? Do they have sushi restaurants there? Facepalm. My friend's girlfriend at the time asked my friend, in front of about 5 of us, if bacon was a meat. Needless to say, they didn't last very long. She thought KFC hot wings were bones dipped in chicken meat. Ugh. She swore up and down that I was the father of her child. Said child was 5 months old when we met. Being bored and having to fill up time with doing the deed is only good for so long, and then it just becomes hollow, which sounds good, but unfortunately it starts to grate on you. and just general embarrassment when I took her out with my friends and wanting to not be alive anymore when out with hers. Smoking hot, and she was really impressed that I could do multiplication in my head, like 6 times 7. Really? Okay, bro, you don't have to lord your amazing multiplication skills over the rest of us. We get it, you're a math genius. Don't hijack the story grouping. My nice, attractive ex really liked to spoil surprises for people. It was really embarrassing whenever he did it. What state is Africa in? My friend who's black is from Georgia, but I don't want to look like a racist and say Georgia. I had no response. It was as if she were draining the IQ points right out of me. When she found out I was Jewish, she said, "I thought all of you got gassed or something in 1940. Such a gorgeous man, but so dumb about health. After we'd finished doing the deed one session, he asked me why I liked him to wear protection. I explained I didn't like that he wore them. I told him I preferred it without, but I was worried about pregnancy and disease, and he was like, "Huh, I never knew that." Immediately went to go get tested after that, and I had him tested as well. Had to make sure to give him a lesson about the dangers of unprotected boinking before I finally broke up with him. I miss his body and his raw animal dumbness sometimes, but I think I made the right choice. He's actually the reason I want to be a health educator now. Oh, and by the way, he hadn't caught anything. It was just dumb luck that he never did, though. He kept pointing out that I was smarter and had more degrees, and he'd introduce his friends as his kind of people. It was frustrating because I never brought up my academic background around him, and it doesn't define me. A friend of mine used to do the same thing. When I stopped wanting to hang out with him, he said it was because I thought I was too good for him and his buddies. No, dude, I stopped hanging out with you because you kept bringing it up. She was gorgeous and a few years older than me. The second day of texting, she got in contact wanting to go out dancing, and I replied, "Okay, but just to let you know, I'm not that good. I have 2 left feet." She stopped replying to me. I thought to myself, no, she didn't actually think, did she? So I replied about 3 hours later saying, "Just so you know, I don't actually have 2 left feet. It's an expression for being bad at dancing." Her immediate reply back was, "Oh, thank God." It was at that point I knew I couldn't ever. She was a model but made her decisions based on her psychic's advice. He thought women's chests were always filled with milk, and he believed bazillion was an actual number. That it was okay to not use protection because it wasn't God's plan for me to have a baby right now. Get the frick out of there. When she turned around to me at the end of Independence Day and said to me that the movie was completely unrealistic because UFOs aren't that big in real life. His friends took me aside and told me that he has a history of whacking his ex-girlfriends. One of the guys actually looked scared that they were telling me. Goodbye, Johnny. I noped the F right out of there. I couldn't teach her how to play Tetris. She just couldn't grasp the concept of the game. It frustrated me so much that I stopped seeing her. When I later saw her in one of the Playboy College Girls issues, I was filled with a remarkable amount of regret. I'm actually marrying him in 13 days. I don't think he's dumb. He is very good looking though, but some of the things that he says do come off as such. He said something as I was saying it, and when I told him I was just thinking the same thing, he said, "I have tilapia." After a few minutes of having him repeat what he just said, he finally said, "I can read your mind." He meant telepathy, not a fish. He also thinks the curbs on the street are called curves, and thinks that raccoons are called ratcoons. He also says, "The bottom line is..." Oh, and this one just happened. We were playing with our daughter's dinosaur train toys, and he thought they were called carnivores because they eat plants and crops. There are just so many things, but I love them. He makes me laugh, and he's very nice. My old friend was dating a really hot girl when one day she pulled out chocolate milk and a strainer. With said strainer, she tried to turn chocolate milk into regular milk. The next day, he started questioning his choices. There was no real final straw, it was more like the fact that I couldn't possibly stand to be around her anymore. She was just so hot. Like step over your own grandmother hot, although she could barely hold a conversation and once confused a bunch of 7-year-olds playing hockey on the professional rink for the actual game we were watching when in line for beer at intermission. When she talked, I either couldn't really understand what she was saying because it made almost no sense, or it was just the most childish joke ever. My youngest cousin had a way sharper wit. But my god, this girl was hot. Hands down, the worst decision I ever made. Oh, this girl was definitely out of my league looks-wise, but she was proud of being stupid, petty about everything, and just annoying. But whatever, I was in my early 20s, and for whatever reason, she liked me, so I went along with it. Things seemed to be going fine when one day she asked me why I always drink so much. I thought about it and realized that I drank literally every day that I saw her, and never drank on the days I knew I wouldn't. Apparently, I just couldn't stand being around this girl unless I was drunk. I decided doing the deed wasn't worth that kind of lifestyle and broke it off the next time I saw her. I wanted to actually be sober when I did break up. Sometimes in life, when you're dating someone out of your league and wonder what they're doing with you can then cut to a few days, weeks, or months later and realize that there are hot people out there who are single for a reason, and then you have to work out how to get out of there. I was in Los Angeles, she was in San Francisco, and wanted to know what time it was in LA. She was born and raised in California. She asked which was closer, Florida or the moon. Beautiful girl she was, and amazing in bed, but a lot of the things that came out of her mouth just astounded me. I managed to put up with it for a while, simply because the boinking was incredibly enjoyable, but at a certain point you just have to take a step back and really think about the situation. The physical side might be fun, but not being able to connect with someone mentally in the long run is a grating thing. Oh, and the conversation of her believing that dinosaurs still existed, they were just hiding in the forests, that was really the final straw for me. And for everyone telling me that birds and some other animals are technically dinosaurs, I understand that, but that's not what I meant. When I'm saying that she was talking about dinosaurs still being real and alive, I meant the type of dinosaurs you'd see in Jurassic Park. Not birds and some sea creatures that are descendants, I mean Tyrannosaurus, Velociraptors, Stegosaurus, and so on and so forth. When she quit her job at the Volkswagen dealership after she found out Volkswagen was founded by Third Reich officials. She thought Central America wasn't a thing. I mean, she's right. North or south, pick a damn continent, Panama. Super, uber hot, and a compulsive liar. The lying is what made her dumb. Like I'd believe she was a stage designer for major tours at age 19. That's a stupid and unbelievable lie, and they just kept coming. She was against immunization. She was convinced that the moon landings were faked. He was a model, but so dumb. I was getting ready for law school, but very inexperienced when it came to dating. We had a lovely time for a while, our chemistry was great, but he eventually ghosted me. A year later, we chatted online to catch up, and he admitted to me that he felt like he wasn't good enough for me, and that's why he stopped talking. With more dating experience, I now know that we wouldn't have worked out as a couple anyway. I realize now that dating someone of similar intelligence is more important than dating someone with superior looks. But damn, he sure was cute and had a majestic python. Gorgeous blonde girl, but really dumb. We met at work and my friend was her friend's brother, so we started talking a bit. She knew her boyfriend was cheating on her, so she cheated on him with me. I felt kinda bad, but her boyfriend was such an awful bullying d-bag. Then they broke up and we started going out. And then a few months later, she dumped me to run away to North Dakota with him. I wasn't really mad. They were both crappy people and deserved each other. She cheated on me, plain and simple. But to add salt to the wound, the guy she cheated on me with had the same name as myself. I mean, maybe she was really stupid and just got confused. He doesn't look like Johnny, but it's his name. Smart. When you cheat with people with the same name, you can't scream the wrong name during intimacy. You've got to give her credit on that one. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. His job was laying people off left and right. So, what does he do? He buys a car on payments. He lost his job the next week and had zero savings. I just couldn't handle the stupid anymore. To everyone saying he needed the car to get to work, no, he didn't. He had a reliable way of getting to work. He didn't even have his driver's license until after buying the car. He bought a car out of his price range at any rate. He had a history of buying things on credit and already had $3,000 worth of electronics bought on a credit card at the time. None of it paid off. The car was a fun purchase when he had zero savings and had a high chance of getting laid off. Such a stupid decision. Was listening to 9 Inch Nails. She called it stupid. Switched over to Wu-Tang. She said it was even stupider. Look, dig what you dig, but sometimes you just know things aren't going to work out. He was a total hottie, with wealthy parents who took us on a nice vacation one time and were super sweet people. The bedroom life was great. My first climax was had, which is a big deal for a college-age girl, just getting past the initial awkward teenage fumbling phase. But he was stuck in the grade school mindset that being dumb was cool. I said something along the lines of making a C on my first calculus exam, and he bragged about failing an entire college pre-algebra class. I just kinda ghosted him after that. On the second date, I got to meet his not-so-attractive, not-so-smart family. It was a super awkward 2 hours at the Olive Garden. Really? I've never met people who were so dumb that I couldn't at least just talk about their hobbies or something to keep them talking for a while? Unless they are that most unfortunate combination of dumb and boring, most people aren't that genetically unlucky, though. She thought Sir Mix-a-Lot had ripped off Nicki Minaj. She was only 1 year younger than me, but she, had no knowledge of pop culture pre-2001. She had never seen Lion King, Hercules, basically the majority of the classic Disney movies. Basically, she made me feel old despite the fact that I was only 20 at the time. So then we're out in a bar and they start playing I Like Big Butts, and she comments, "Oh my god, this is a remix of Anaconda's stuff." I told her, no, this is the original. She didn't believe me, and as I sat there stunned, I realized, nope, this isn't worth the effort. I dumped her the next day. Magnificent butt, though. She told me to smell her hair one time and proudly announced, "It has fruticus in it." What? I replied, like people do. Fruticus. It's the main ingredient. It's by Garnier. It comes in a green bottle. It was fructis. Garnier fructis. She's still banging though, just dumb. I had to explain a Larry the Cable Guy joke to him. She was allergic to bananas, but she liked the flavor. So she ate banana-flavored baby food on a regular basis. If it didn't trigger the allergic reaction, that actually sounds pretty clever. If it still did, then I see your point. That's actually quite possible, actually. Several allergies only apply to unprocessed fruit or veggies. I have a friend who gets painful eczema from eating raw tomatoes, but soup or sauce are perfectly fine. Watching Star Wars when a scene with a hologram comes up. If they can do that kind of thing for a movie, why can't they do it in real life? Jesus tap-dancing Christ. She was a yoga instructor who was constantly getting attention from other guys. Constantly. I knew her through a mutual friend, and I suppose she found the fact that I didn't chase her appealing. Regardless, she initiated with me. We dated for a bit. Physically, we were very compatible. However, she was constantly demanding attention from me and expected me to cater to her every whim while we were out, which I would do to a degree, but never to her satisfaction. Because of her attractiveness level, her previous boyfriends would do anything for her at the drop of a hat. That's just not really my style. I wasn't ever disrespectful of her or treated her poorly, I just wasn't a relationship gopher. One night at a friend's birthday, even downtown, she kept telling me about how many guys were hitting on her at the location we were at. She became irritated that I wasn't up in arms about the whole ordeal and that I should show more concern about how much attention she was getting. I responded with, "Should I worry about you going home with one of them?" And she replied, "If you don't start acting like you give a crap, then maybe I will." My final response was, "Go for it then." It may have been a little callous on my end, but I was really done dealing with that kind of crap. When she asked me if World War II was a war fought between England and Scotland. She thought that Cubist artists were from Cuba. She read that Picasso was Spanish and got confused. In an art exposition dedicated to him that she made me go to with 5 of her family members on a fricking Sunday. Oh, and I also had to explain to her why climbing up a staircase was harder than climbing down. And for that, I also had to go through how gravity works. Worth noting, she wasn't a child. She was estranged from most of her family except for one of her siblings. I asked what that sibling did for a living, and she got agitated with me that I'd ask such a thing. She was a God-fearing Republican who referred to anyone left of her political position, such as myself, as a violent liberal. I'm also an atheist. The final straw was that she wanted to have children someday, and I most definitely did not. She wasn't on the pill, so we always used protection, except for that one time she climbed onto me while I was fetching it. I instantly pictured 18 years saddled to this woman paying for a child I didn't want. We lasted a couple more weeks, but I knew it was over. She thought that the word town had 3 syllables. We were at Chipotle with friends, and out of the blue she exclaims, "Wow, I just realized the word town has 3 syllables. Tau-wu-nz," while slowly clapping with each syllable like you learn to do in elementary school. She thought it was safe to accept drinks from random people at clubs. I rhetorically asked if Hungary was a country. She said she doesn't listen to country. He thought that his phone kept getting heavier because of all the apps he'd installed. She had a pet cockatiel. She figured it would like to spend some time in the sunlight and fresh air, so she put it on her finger and took it outside with her. The second she got outside, it flew away. She cried for days, and I just couldn't find sympathy. She told me that the fact that I believed in evolution was the most stupid, uninformed thing that had ever come out of my mouth. I was a zoology major, now a med student. One of my classes in college was literally called evolution, and yet I was the dumb one. As a history major who was once told by a mostly lovely but not galaxy-brained former partner that history was pointless because we can't go back and see what actually happened with our own eyes, I feel for you. I had a beautiful girlfriend once that a lot of people would think was dumb. Every time she said something ridiculous, I'd just agree with her and carry it further as if we were both joking just in the same way. She'd laugh and always had a great smile with big beautiful eyes. Whenever she got mad at me for something, I'd just look at her and say, "I didn't do or say that to make you upset. Why would I do that on purpose? I'm always on your side." And she'd believe me. In fact, it was the truth, but so many people just can't get past the little peeves and annoyances. For her, it was just as simple as explaining that her boyfriend was always on her side. For my part, whenever I started to get upset with her, I'd always internally compare what I was upset about to not having her, and she'd always win. In the end, she said she wanted to be free. No reason given, and as her friend, I'd always considered love as something you give, not get. So where I could have held on, I just let her go. You can't own people anyway, and I was only ever her friend. It's been years, and I'm still the only person she's ever had a long-term relationship with, and she's still the only person I've ever loved that much. Insisted that he needed to change out the air in his tires because it was springtime. He said the air in them was winter air, and the pressure would be all wrong because it was too cold. He emptied his tires completely before refilling them. These stories are the braggiest of the humble brags. Well, after I told her I was an apprentice of Stephen Hawking while simultaneously working in a lab developing a cure for a transmissible disease, she took out her beautiful double D chest and asked me if chicken was a fish. I knew we could never be together then. Barf. She asked, "Is it true that you're colorblind?" I said, "Yep." "Oh wow, that's awesome. I look so much better in black and white." Here are some examples. She saw 10:10 p.m. on a digital clock and asked if 1001 was ever a year. She knew we were in 2000 and something, whatever year it was, but wasn't sure if 1001 had ever been a year. She tried tanning under the lights in my living room. She wanted to put diesel in her car because it was cheaper. She thought a lower unit price at Walmart was more expensive. You get less units. How is that better? She thought doubling the recommended heat in the oven would cut the cooking time by 75%. Seriously, no clue how she came to that conclusion. She also thought the sport of bowling was started by people with 3 fingers. I may have suggested that one to her to see if she'd buy it, and she did. She was definitely a 9.5 to 9.7 out of 10, but she had the social skills of a particularly stupid hamster. She tried to be best friends with everyone instantly, which drove people away almost all the time. She couldn't maintain any female friendships. She used doing the deed with people like a bargaining tool and gave it away too easily. She had no maturity or coping skills. She valued nobody else's time or energy. And the final straw was that when she imagined that a guy outside the bar made a rude face at the bartender, this offended her, so she went outside and proceeded to stomp this dude on the shin. For no frickin' reason. I said, F that, and I bailed. She thought the periodic table was an app to keep track of her cycle. While having dinner with my family, she insisted that she wanted to go into politics. Cool, I'm okay with that, just stop talking, honey. The next thing out of her mouth very genuinely was, and if that doesn't work, I'm gonna move to Florida and become a mermaid. A fricking mermaid. What phase did you shock your parents by never growing out of? Skateboarding. I'm 37 and I'm still at it 27 years later. Falls hurt so much more now, probably because of the falls from 15 years ago. Still, I've never found anything that comes close to replacing it in my life. My obsession with flying. I'm working on my instrument rating now. I started playing cocktail piano music for parties at age 14, just for fun. Then I started getting paid handsomely for it with generous tips in the brandy snifter. Now I do it regularly when asked for special occasions. Listening to metal music. I pushed through my teenage years and I still love it. I'm 35 and I still listen to a lot of the heavier stuff. I grew out of the image, but not the music. Playing video games and playing bass guitar and spinning records. Mine convinced me that all of my old Magic the Gathering cards were a waste of money. I sold them all 17 years ago, and seeing their value today is disgusting. One of my friends said his father tore up his decks to get him to stop wasting his damn time, and apparently one of the cards was a Black Lotus. Listening to music all the time. I just love picking up an album, sitting my butt down and just listening to it start to finish without ever leaving my seat. Feels a lot like watching a good movie afterwards. I don't know many people that do this either. My sister did a report on the meat industry as a freshman in high school. She became a vegan as a result. She's now 32 and has been strictly vegan ever since. Yeah, it turns out that when we see the start-to-finish process up close, a lot of people just outright refuse to have anything to do with that crap. Fair enough. Not everyone, but then again, most people who work in the industry are part of one isolated process and don't see the full process from factory farm to supermarket packet. How unsocial I am. My mother was sure I'd eventually meet the right people or come out of my shell, but I quite simply don't enjoy spending time with many people. I find groups of greater than 5 a total drain of energy, and with small groups, I often get pretty bored and want to go home 2 or 3 hours after meeting up. There have been a handful of people I've met which I could really spend 24/7 with and not feel the need to leave. It's a rare thing, and weirdly, I don't really know what made them so tolerable or made me like their presence, but it does happen. It's not common enough for my mother, though. She thinks I'll end up a hermit. Not wanting kids. I've known that pretty much since the first hair grew on my Jimmy John. Everyone said I'd change my mind and grow out of it, and I never did. Me too. I find it hilarious that because they say, you'll change your mind, you also don't get to decide when you want your reproductive bits fixed. Some people might change their minds, however, some of us never will. My interest in history. My parents were against it because they didn't think that I'd ever be able to hold down a job. I worked extremely hard, earned a great degree from a top university, currently the youngest person working at a fairly prestigious job, have traveled to multiple non-Western countries, and I'm looking into great PhD programs. I never plan on not doing history. In elementary school, I was very talkative and extroverted. Good student, but always got the teachers annoyed because I'd talk to people and distract everyone. Not a class clown, just chatty. Then I got really quiet and stopped going out of my way to talk to people. I'm still introverted as F. No, I don't know what happened. My parents, mainly my stepdad, were pretty racist, and they thought that my feelings on the subject, by which I mean liking or not liking someone based only on their skin color was wrong, would absolutely change as I got older. I'm 44, and my feelings have not changed. My glorious neck-length strawberry blonde hair. Resenting them for my weird and damaging upbringing. Looking like a homeless person. Pokemon. My parents used to tell me I'd lose interest in gaming as I grew up. That didn't happen. I don't really understand the outgrowing gaming thing. It's like it was the choice of entertainment when our generation was young, and I still play games occasionally. TV was the boomers' choice of entertainment. Before that, it was music and radio. Did all of them outgrow that? Likely not. Making things and doing crafts. Ever since I was first handed crayons and construction paper, I've been filled with the desire to create. My mum thought I was crazy a couple of years ago when I quit my corporate job and opened a shop on Etsy. It was very successful and I made a lot of money. It became a little too stressful though, so I went back to my old job. However, I trained my mum on how to run the shop, and now she's able to work from home more, which she loves. I love that she learned creativity is not just a silly hobby or waste of time. Me being single. My love of cars and trucks. How much I tickle my own pickle. My social anxiety. That I didn't want children. It's been 26 years since I made that assertion, and that I thought religion was stupid. She isn't a grandmother, and I'm not suddenly a practicing Jew. The whole lesbian thing. This was submitted by user Scottish Lesbian. Oh, good thing the Scottish part was just a phase, right? Right? Fortunately, they're not out of their phase on that one either. Biting my nails. I was born brain damaged. I also have ADHD and OCD. But here's the tragic part. I don't look disabled at all. I look very normal at first glance. My parents were confused when I couldn't do math well and had trouble, huge trouble with tasks such as setting the table and cleaning. They thought, the kid is just pretending to be stupid to mess with us. This is all just a long con to get out of chores. I'd also often fall while biking or roller skating. They got angry with me and told me to quit being so careless. I'm 27 and they still think I'm just messing with them. Normal people just don't get it. They just don't. Their attitude is, what do you mean you can't set the table? How is that even possible? It is possible. It's absolutely possible. They say, a 4-year-old could do this, so obviously someone who's 27 could too. No, he or she couldn't. Maybe it's counterintuitive to you. That doesn't stop it from being 100% true. The fact that your parents can be this deep in denial when you've presumably told them that you have been diagnosed as these things is both breathtaking and deeply tragic. They'd be happier if they accepted it, in all likelihood. Having piercings and tattoos on my body. I have facial piercings that'll be turning 18 this year. Although my parents swore no one would ever hire me with piercings and visible tattoos, I'm a gainfully employed medical professional. Reddit. It's been part of my daily routine for 13 years. Being gay. My grandma still thinks my younger cousin is confused. He just turned 33. Crap, I thought it was just a phase. From 11 through 19, I just sat there like an idiot thinking, everyone goes through these confusing feelings about being gay. I'll grow out of them. Then one day in college, I realized, oh no, wait, this is permanent. In middle school, I legit thought it was normal to look at men in the buff, because obviously I was just curious about the male anatomy. I thought one day my body would flip a switch and I'd start being attracted to women. They thought I'd grow out of talking back. Now I'm an accomplished intercollegiate debater. Wearing black all of the time. At one point in middle school, my parents refused to buy me any more black clothes, so I opted for dark purples and blues, which they couldn't really argue with. Over 15 years later, yeah, there's a reason I wore all black as a kid. It looks good on me. And so 90% of my wardrobe is still black, with exceptions from my other favorite color, teal, and some striking navy blue dresses I've picked up over the years. Me not ever wanting to have children. I found myself a great child-free husband and we're living happily ever after. Despite my parents and everyone else saying I'd changed my mind. I've known it since I was 12, I'm in my 30s now and I've never been more sure. I love my life. Luckily for them, they've accepted it. Atheism. I grew up in a fairly religious household and when I was a teenager, I stopped believing in God. They figured I'd come back to the church eventually, but after 16 years, it's not looking likely. Depression and anxiety. It's been 15 years. Still going strong. Yay! Anime. Nope, that crap stays with you for life. My parents gave me so much crap for it. But I liked it. They'd belittle me, forbid me, and generally judge me for my interests as if I was some terrible person. My mum didn't get it because apparently it's gross and weird, and therefore the worst thing ever. Didn't matter that I was lead in the school musical, never went to parties, got good grades, and played sports. I was wrong and messed up for liking anime. Now, at 27, I still enjoy it. It didn't warp me or mess me up. My mum has since chilled out after escaping the awful bullying environment that my father put on us. Now my younger brother is into it. We share interests in several animes, but he's into the, hardcore stuff, and I don't so much approve, but only because that obsession stems from his crippling lack of self-esteem and social immaturity. It holds him back and gives him excuses to hide inside himself. What my mother doesn't understand is how anime, like every single hobby out there, has just as much bad elements as good. She just can't accept that, and it's holding her back from connecting with her kids. Being a girl. Yep, thankfully the phase theory went the way of the Barbies a long time ago. Being a metalhead that wears mostly black. Yep, 30 years and still headbanging. Listening to punk rock. 12 years later, my old man rolls his eyes whenever I play that headbanging crap. The fact that I'm an atheist. I told them when I was 14 years old and they laughed it off, saying that I was probably confused. They told me it was just a phase and they were totally sure I'd believe it again soon. I'm 21 and I still don't believe in anything mystical. I'm 100% atheist. My obsession with baking. They said it was too feminine. Guess who's not getting any of my muffins? You're lazy and you don't want to do your work. Turns out I have severe ADHD and an anxiety disorder. Joke's on you, parents. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Technically it did end because of professionalism, but I used to love doing crazy stuff with my hair. I had a red ombre, regular black and blonde ombre, the Skrillex look, shaved on the sides and long on top, a white blonde pixie cut, and pink hair. They said I'd look back and cringe. I look back and, man, I was hot as hell. Someday I'll be my own boss or working in a more creative field and I'll do it all again. Being an eco-warrior. My dad thought it's just a kid's hobby when an 11-year-old me bought a book on ecology and started sorting the trash. Gradually, he himself started recycling, saving energy, and reusing. He doesn't admit my input, though. Physics. Social conventions and parental expectations of a safe, job-secure major made them make me join the mainstream of engineering that rules India today. They thought I'd forget physics, shut the frick up, and get a cozy, middling job catering to their normal aspirations. Well, I stuck with it, self-studied physics, and they began supporting me in patches. And here I am, an undergraduate thesis in cosmology later, hoping graduate school applications in physics go well. I'm really a lesbian, and I still don't eat meat. Clichés for everyone. Dungeons and Dragons. I started playing it in '84 when I found a boxed set in a garage sale for $1. I still play it nowadays. Amen to that. The narrator's fascination with RPGs is going strong after 22 years. Although, to be fair, my parents likely knew that I was going to be a massive nerd my entire life. Those early yearbook photos are very telling. My love for professional wrestling. It started when I was 13, and by 15, I was telling them I wanted to be a wrestler. I'm 21 now and in the process of getting my body training going full blast before going to a wrestling school starting this summer. Loving punk rock, dyeing my hair bright colors or shaving my head or something in between. Being online all the time. I married the man that I met online. Video games. I'm still addicted, homies. That's what you get for never buying me a Nintendo. And, of course, being a disappointment. Mine thought that me living with them was a phase. Crap. Being socially awkward. Homosexuality. My obsession with the TV show Emergency. I'm now 55 years old and have been a paramedic for 37 years and a nurse for 24 years. Not wanting to have children and not doing substances or drinking booze. I'm 39, still child-free, and I don't take anything harder than Advil. Legos. I'm 25 and I still love me some Legos. Being vegan. Made the switch almost 2 years ago and I have no plans on going back. Wearing clothes of black, blue, and grey tones. Still stuck with some goth clothes as well. My mother told me computers were just a fad. Now I'm a support analyst making nearly twice as much as my father does after 27 years of law enforcement. I really love SpongeBob. When I was a kid, I constantly asked for SpongeBob sheets or other merch to decorate my room, but my mom insisted I style my room so it would grow with me. Senior year of high school, it was time to get new sheets, and guess what I asked for and finally got? I have SpongeBob stuff all over my room, a desk covered with SpongeBob McDonald's toys, a clock, posters, a calendar, SpongeBob stickers on almost everything I have. I even mounted a frisbee on the wall because it looked better there, and I don't play frisbee. I'm 21 and have plans to get 2 SpongeBob tattoos in the future. I can't see myself falling out of love with the show anytime soon. Dyeing my hair different colors. I started bleaching and dyeing my hair in 3rd grade on my own, and I've been doing it ever since. The whole goth thing. I'm 29 and a mum now, and the darkness inside hasn't quite worn off. My childhood. Women's chests. My Chinese cartoon watching. Rock music, science fiction and fantasy, preferring not to be enclosed in the warm embrace of Jesus' love, the list goes on. My wife. We were high school sweethearts and no one thought it would last. Dated 3 years and then we got married and had 3 kids. Been married for over 17 years. Piercings, tattoos, and body mods. Me being a jerk. Wanting to leave my home country. It wasn't so much that they disapproved of it, but that I was just such an awkward homebody when I was younger that it didn't seem plausible. My dad traveled for a living, so it wasn't like it was a completely new concept to my family. Now my mum encourages it and thinks I should make it a focus once I leave college. My love for video games and cosplay. Been cosplaying 17 years now and gaming for 26. Being transgender. When I came out, my mum said, "No, you're not." 7 years later, she's paying for my name change. Well, I'm happy that the last bit would at least seem to suggest that she's accepted you for who you are, so congratulations. I'd say that trans, gay, and atheist seem to be the biggest answer group here. Good on all of you for being true to yourselves. Horses. Love at first sight. Mum got lucky and once managed to buy a few lessons for me. Then my father left and we were in poverty until I was in high school and could be a working student for a show barn. Traded hours and hours of work for a few minutes in the saddle of the crappiest horses that no one else wanted to ride. Not that I'm complaining. I never won any ribbons, but I damn sure learned to ride literally anything with 4 legs. I thank the trainers there that I was able to have such an opportunity at all. Fast forward a lot of years of barely being able to take some lessons here and there, and finally at 29 years old, I was able to purchase my own thoroughbred. I still work my butt off to afford him and his care. I found a barn where I can work off the majority of my board, but it's 100% worth it to achieve the dream I've had since I can remember. Now I have the best horse I could have asked for. He was a terrible racehorse, but he's the sweetest, coolest guy I could have got. Hopefully we end up eventing, but if he doesn't like that, we'll go for jumpers. His name? Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Dyeing my hair unnatural colors. I've been doing it since I was 14, and now I'm 26 with green hair. Being into art and drawing. Dad wanted me to put down the pencil and be a scientist or railroad worker. Kept telling me my uncle could get me a job when I went to design school. Joke's on him, I'm a designer now. People pay me money to draw all day. Ha! The heavy metal music and dressing all in black, nerd, goth style at age 13. I'm now 22 and I still dress that way. My endless attempts to avoid all social contact. Grew my hair out long, had a good 2 to 3 year stint where I didn't own a single t-shirt that wasn't black, started being pretty sad all of the time, and started listening to much different music. Teenage stuff, I guess. While they might have been right about the lack of colors being a phase, I still really love emo music. Emo isn't a phase, Mom. First-person shooter games, computers, anything like that. That's not to say my parents didn't like computers, they just thought I'd move on. My depression. I really do wish it was just a phase. Cartoons, video games, anime, among others. Anime, I still watch but I'm pretty selective. But I got 2 video games for Christmas and there's new episodes of Steven Universe on Monday. I'm 28, married, and we just had our first kid. Sleeping with stuffed animals, only eating 3 or 4 different foods, and watching cartoons. Being antisocial. Frick people. Hey, frick you too, pal. Being obsessed with cats. Playing the drums, about to do a 2-month tour in Europe and just got booked for a week of shows in Japan. Becoming a Christian. Punk. Listening to metal, going to concerts and wearing jeans and band t-shirts. Turns out I wasn't just pretending to be bisexual and transgender, but was in fact those things. 10 years after coming out and they still think it's just a phase. Just a really long phase. Beard. Granted, I was well into my 20s when I stopped shaving. My parents assumed I'd eventually get sick of it and shave it off, complaining about how I look like a hobo every visit. That was 7 years ago. Today, my glorious chin waterfall of man hair cascades all over my chest. Nobody complains about it. My wife came to accept it after about a year. My parents gave up after about 2. I got into metal music around age 15 and changed what I wear to leather and denim jackets with the band patches. Now I'm 20, I still love metal music and have a few battle jackets, and I designed my own patches. Horses. I took lessons for 7 years, got my own horse, went to farrier school and have been a farrier for 6 years now. Went on a trail ride with my horse today, never going to let go of him. My parents used to tell me that I'd lose interest in gaming as I grew up. That didn't happen. I think my mum always assumed that my eating issues were just the usual teenage self-consciousness, but it's been 5 years and 40 pounds now, and I really think she's going to have to realize she's going to have a skinny, salad-loving daughter who swears she hates chocolate. Thinking that toots are funny. They always have been and always will be. Staying up all night. Paradoxically, I'm also a morning person, but I loathe afternoons. Seriously, why can't I nap from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m.? Single and child-free. I'm 45. Huh. Tooting on my sister's head. What are the biggest secrets of theme parks? At the park I worked for, the games were easier to win earlier in the day so that people would carry around the giant prizes and entice other people to play. Don't ever go in the ball pits. Little kids track all sorts of food and grime into the pit and regularly go number 1 in there since they confuse it for a pool. The balls are only cleaned once a week, and that generally means just putting them in a net bag and hosing them off. You just keep spraying until the water stops coming off brown. They're then air-dried and not sanitized in any way. Former Six Flags employee here, my park is the safest in the country because we call the rides down for rain, for people hurling, and for lost items. They could just be obstructing the track. So if a ride is down, it's probably not for a mechanical reason. We even pulled an emergency stop while I was being trained on one roller coaster because a military official lost his ID and was threatening my boss if we didn't go get it for him. If people knew how small that issue was, they'd be furious that we stopped the ride. I could individually control the speed of your go-kart, so if you were a jerk to me, you were going to lose every race you were in. All I had to do was press the button corresponding to the kart, and then would press a number that would set the max speed. It was in miles per hour if I recall correctly. Pretty sure there was also an all karts button to set the speed and stop of all of the karts at once. My friend in high school used to work at Hershey Park, and one day we went together. When we ordered lunch, I was just planning on asking for a cup of water with my meal so I didn't have to pay an extra $5. My friend told me to ask the cashier for a cup of magic water instead of just a cup of water. I trusted this friend, so I did what she said. When I received my cup of magic water, I took a sip, and to my surprise it was Sprite. So I got a free cup of Sprite with my meal that day. Worked a churro cart next to a large pond in the park. At night, it was impossible to keep the bugs out of the cinnamon and sugar bin. That's some extra protein right there. But yeah, that seems like the sort of thing you pay the health inspector to look the other way for. About 8 years ago, I managed a whitewater rafting ride, the big donut tubes that can sit 6 people, as a side job while in college. One day, the water filter broke down. The managers kept the ride running for over 2 weeks anyway. The water smelled so bad and turned dark green/brown. The inside of the rafts smelled like an old porta potty. We were instructed to tell guests the water filter was broken, but the water was clean, which I'm pretty sure was a lie. Thankfully, being a shift leader, I didn't need to go anywhere near the water, but I did feel bad for my employees and the guests who rode, despite looking obviously disgusted by the smell. A lot of scary, dangerous rides are operated by stupid teenagers. My source? I was a stupid 16-year-old learning to operate rides at Six Flags. Yikes. Don't they count as heavy machinery? Are OSHA regulations state by state or nationwide? Because where I live, you have to be 18 to legally operate heavy machinery. Anyone under 18 couldn't operate the photo printers at my last job because of it. I'm fairly sure they're not considered heavy machinery, which is screwed up, but that sums things up nicely. Throw up with no visible blood is either cleaned up with a sawdust-like material to soak up the liquid and then swept into a dustbin, or just hosed off with a garden hose. The coaster seat or table is usually not sanitized or anything, so you're sitting in dried chuck-up particles. That sawdust material was used way back when I was in grade school, and yep, it's used for everything. I don't expect more than a hose for chuck-up on rides. It's probably not dangerous if you're properly clothed, like not super short shorts and a top that covers your back. Many rides require this anyways these days. But if it was damp and milky particles, I'd be worried. I'd just be wary of wet ride seats unless it was raining. My place used to say that any change or cash lost on a ride was donated to charity. If they meant the charity of their employees' pockets, then they weren't lying. Quarters were the good ones to find since it was rarely bills. I worked at Dollywood when I was 18. Most ride operators are minimally trained. I even accidentally pressed the harness release, panicked and started the roller coaster. You should have seen people's faces as the train started rolling and harnesses popped open. Also, the software running the ride was Windows 95. This was in 2006 or 7 on a ride built in 2004. I'll add another secondary story about that coaster. This was the Tennessee Tornado, which had harnesses shaped like a U that went down over your head and across your chest into your lap. One day we had a rather large man, probably nearing 450 to 500 pounds, wearing a bright orange shirt. He somehow manages to actually get into the seat at the very front of the train, and as we're checking harnesses, this guy goes down exactly one click. Everyone knows that ratcheting sound from amusement ride restraints. Dozens of clicks on the way down, and this man's went one. It wasn't even across his chest, it was a few degrees short of being perfectly horizontal across his body. The only thing keeping this man from dying was one click of a ratchet. I've ridden this coaster by myself in the morning for pre-operation check. G-force essentially holds you in the seat by itself. My 160-pound, 18-year-old body would never leave the seat during any of the loops. I don't know if gravity would have held this man in the seat had that one click failed. I just remember the three of us dock workers standing at the rear of the deck watching this glowing orange 6XL t-shirt look like a pumpkin strapped to a missile go around 3 quivering loops before coming back safely to the station. My aunt and uncle work for Disney World. Apparently when someone chucks up on a ride, it's called a protein spill. Ex-Disney cast member here, we call it a Code V. Also, if you ever hear a cast member yell 105 to another cast member, that means he or she thinks a nearby park guest is hot and the cast member is alerting nearby coworkers to see. We used to crank up the amount of salt in the fries and then build a soda stall next to it. Next, we'd remove some of the paths to trap guests in the salty fries and expensive soda area. We made a killing. Most theme parks avoid paying overtime because they're considered seasonal. Therefore, they understaff and get employees to work 60-hour weeks, usually at less than stellar pay rates. That's completely legal though. As far as shady crap, the instances are few and far between but because parks are cash cows and no one wants to mess that up. At the water park I worked at, the pools had their pH levels checked constantly. 2 people's jobs was to walk around all day and continuously check the levels. The food is crap at these places, but that's not a dirty little secret. I worked at the Fudgery in Six Flags. It's technically a part of retail, so none of the employees have any food safety training, which means the back is never cleaned properly. It had mold, and kids don't get new gloves after handling disgusting, sweaty money. Worked at Cedar Point for a summer on disaster transport. May she rest in peace. Despite being an indoor ride, it would have to go down anytime there was a significant amount of rain because the roof leaked. Supposedly because the fireworks they set off from the beach would burn holes in it, but I don't know how true that actually is. This is especially significant for disaster transport because it didn't run on a track like most coasters. It ran freely in a bobsled-like trough. So the ride itself would actually be affected by the weight distribution in a given train. It would also fishtail around corners really badly if the troughs were wet. So every time it rained, we'd send one of us to ride every couple cycles to feel whether or not it was fishtailing yet, because there was no other way to know without shutting the whole ride down to walk the troughs. If we could tell that it was fishtailing, the ride would go down for mechanical reasons. We'd wait until the rain let up, then start running empty trains through to assist with drying everything up, with one of us going through occasionally until we could tell that the fishtailing had stopped. The real secret is that the ride was 100 times more fun when it was fishtailing because it was less predictable. Another case of the ride being a little unsafe making it more fun, there was a brief period of time where someone with an employee badge asked for an air hawk from the ride operators on the Skyhawk. They'd intentionally not pushed the harnesses all the way down. Definitely not enough that you were going to fall through, but enough to get some absolutely sick airtime while the ride was going. To this day, I still try to position myself in the seat in a way that the harness will be a couple of clicks short of where it's supposed to be because it's so frickin' fun. Well, the narrator expected all the stories of gross hygiene breaches and horrible working conditions for the poor teens. He didn't expect that the staff in these places were just constantly testing to see if the rides were below the accepted level of deadliness. Absolutely wild. I used to be in management for a small family-owned park in Utah. They hire lots of 14 and 15-year-olds because they own a few cattle, and I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I think technically they're considered farmhands, which allows them to work at a younger age than the usual 16. Since this place is one of the only employers in Utah to do this, they hire tons of young'uns. Disney has an underground tunnel system for workers in different areas of the park to move around so that you don't see people dressed up from any other area out of their place. Also, there's a color Disney uses in their parks that's the least detectable shade of green so that trash cans and stuff are basically hidden in plain sight. The colors are called Go Away Green and Blend in Blue, and they can be seen almost everywhere in the park. Also, Disney World was built on elevated land because Florida is one giant bog, and their underground system simply wouldn't be possible below ground. Former ride op who worked on multiple major level parks here, how often the ride crew members are hungover and possibly still drunk is a massive concern. You work with the same people day in and day out. You become family. Especially at the age when you don't have much responsibility other than putting gas in the car, all you're doing is partying. The park closes at 10 p.m., and by 11 p.m. you're shotgunning beers in your manager's backyard, while the new kid is doing backflips off the roof of the house into the pool. This goes on until 4 or 5 a.m., and all you have to do is be at work at 9:30. Good times. Also, the inter-park relationships. MTV should really do a reality show on working at an amusement park. The amounts of drama is crazy. Ex-employee of Phantasialand, Germany. The African immigrant workers were all sent to work on the Black Mamba ride. It's kind of embarrassing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Every morning the wave pool is crystal clear. When it's not, it's because of wee-wee, sunblock, dirt, etc. Everyone knows they're full of these things, but I don't think people realize how clean the water is when it starts off in the morning. I worked at Worlds of Fun. I passed all ride operating tests without actually being at the ride itself or ever seeing the panel. Since I passed the tests, I could then operate any of the rides at any point during the season, even though I realistically had never seen any of them before. It's been a while since I worked at Disney. Here's what I can remember. Code words. 101, ride down, and 102, the ride's back up. Those are the official ones. The unofficial ones? Well, there was 105 for an attractive guest, 737 is a fat guest, and 747 is a fat guest on an ECV. We spread Vauban on the throw-up. As others have described, it's a sawdust-like material with an incredibly distinctive smell. And we do indeed hate you. That one clever thing you do to try and get a rise out of us? Yeah, we've seen that a million times before. Being nice is a great way to get us to treat you well. Nice people get to ride again if I'm feeling generous. People who try to insist to ride again stop the ride for everyone else. We had a little book which had the ability to rectify situations. You dropped your soda? We'll get you another one. Weren't supposed to, but we did give them out for magical moments. We could give you a fast pass for any ride in the park and for free food. At the end of the night, we walk the track and locate items lost. Some of the unsavory employees, cast members, would find items and take them. One guy I knew sold the stuff on eBay all the time. And yes, we can get you into the park for free. No, we're not going to. Some people sell their passes. You can be termed for it. Didn't stop them. When you work the hotels there, we give back ridiculous amounts of money for stupid inconveniences. In addition, if someone is really nice or celebrating something, we can deliver free stuff to the room. Once spent $300 on someone because they were incredibly kind and celebrating a milestone anniversary. And if you complain enough, Disney will cater to you. My ex's mum never made reservations for anything. She'd just go and insist she had a reservation, argue shamelessly for 15 to 20 minutes, and eventually we'd be seated. It was always awkward. I didn't work at Disney during the time. I did it for Cinderella's Royal Table, the steakhouse in Canada, Epcot, Crystal Palaces, literally any restaurant. We know you're full of crap, we've heard everything. At the end of the day, it's a job, and most, aside from college program kids who actually think the experience is going to mean something in their lives, don't give a crap about you, how much you've saved for years, among the other usual excuses. We're doing a minimum wage job and we don't get paid enough to deal with your crap. Listen for context. Have a magical day is frequently used as go F yourself. How gross the food is. Overpriced and frozen, dropped on the floor and picked up with unwashed hands. I worked in the in-park subway and my manager made me wash off the moldy tomatoes to serve to customers because she forgot to order fresh food. Subway. Eat mold. We're officially out of bought license plates. Kids go number 2 in the wave pool constantly. All we do is clear it out for 10 minutes and then let people back in. You should never mess with ride ops. Safety is always number 1, and I will kick you out of the park if you're threatening someone's safety, including your own. Listen to all the instructions given, even if you don't agree, because it's there to prevent you from being hurt. Yet another tip from the Basic Human Decency Handbook that still so many people will completely disregard. Give the poor teens a break. They're just trying to get through the day. Not lurid, but just behind the scenes from a different angle. I worked as an acrobat in a show at a park one summer, and it was amazing. I got paid $125 a day, so as a 19-year-old like a decade ago who had been waiting tables for 12 to 13-hour shifts during the summer before, it felt like I was an actual rock star or something. I had money for my monthly rent in less than a week each month, and money to spare that I could blow on clubbing and stuff. I had 3 half-hour shows a day with 2 3-hour breaks between shows. During the breaks, I could go ride rides because as a contracted employee through the production company, I wasn't technically a direct employee of the park. It was a medium-sized park that I'd thought was large when I was a high schooler, but I got tired of the rides in like 3 or 4 days. Then I wandered the water park and found the lazy river and realized I could just ride the lazy river all day and tan and get paid for it. Later, even that got boring to do all day, so I'd just spend my time between shows getting better at my acro that I was performing in the show. But I didn't want to get hurt pushing too hard on the job since there was no workers' comp, so I ended up learning to play guitar and sing at the top of scaffolding on the set, like 25 feet up with a cool breeze and audio privacy just from the sheer amount of park noise around me. I'd do it again if I had the chance, but I'm not really good enough anymore and I have to be a grown-up. It was probably the best 4 months of my life in some ways. I think the only behind-the-scenes thing that I think everyone would be interested in is just, like, I was allowed to walk everywhere in the park. I had an ID badge that someone could theoretically check, but my costume for the show was streetwear anyway, and no one ever really checked who I was or asked why I was there at any point of the summer. All summer I just walked around exploring the minutiae of the park with impunity, and 80% of the time I could have been a random park goer and no one checked me. It really is amazing how deep you go into places just by acting confident without anyone asking if you should be there. I worked at Disney World and at Universal. I wish I had dirt to share, but both companies were on the up and treated guests with care and provided workers safe environments in which to do their jobs. What I can share for those interested: managers get paid very little but stay on for love of the job. And people in charge of rides instantly hate anyone who stands up when they're clearly not supposed to. You ruin our days by doing so, idiots. Former park ops at a Florida theme park here, my job was to do custodial work in the bathroom and pathways, like sweep, take out the trash, hose. I had a designated section while occasionally getting assigned theater duty. That $15 meal that you just paid for in the restaurant? Yeah, the employees can get all of that for $2 or $3 depending on the items. Theme park food is way overpriced for guests. If you complain enough, you will get what you want. When the theater hits capacity, I can't let anyone in. You can give me a sob-story about how you traveled all the way from Antarctica for all I care. The second that you mention wanting to talk to a supervisor, I have to get them. 9 times out of 10, my supervisor will let you through the show no problem, just to keep you happy. I, on the other hand, will be slightly annoyed, but that's how things work in theme parks. There are plainclothes security officers walking around the whole entire park. You probably don't even notice. So please, think twice before doing anything stupid like doing the deed on the sky ride. There's quite a few even ignoring the markups, like even if they give a prize every time you played a dumb game, the park would still win. So let's see. Many of the people you would actually hope are mature adults and aren't drunk or on something, well, they're 16-year-old green herb users. They also live a very exciting life that makes annoying sitcoms seem reasonable. Guess who Jenny from X Roller Coaster was doing the deed with behind the fry stand? I assure you I don't care, but you'll tell me anyway. Many of those people are massively overworked, and I don't mean like, oh, he did a few hours overtime and hit 45 hours, I mean a 60 to 80 plus hour week for a month straight. We don't get paid overtime. We can work anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day, and there's a special exception in the US Labor Code that says that theme park employees don't need to be paid overtime if they're a seasonal employee. And it just so happens that theme parks mostly hire seasonal employees. Chew on that for your next visit to a theme park north of the Mason-Dixon line. Beyond that, here's a tip. If it's a seasonal park and they're looking to hire, for the love of God, do not apply at the start of the season. They'll tell you that there are more benefits, but if that's at the start of a season, they're understaffed, which means you work double shifts. An employee in the park collapsed in early May after being on his feet for over 10 hours straight. A guy at a chicken tendies restaurant in the theme park was a farmer hick. He liked to do stupid pranks. Turnover was so high, a manager was 16 years old. Basically, kids run the parks. Anyway, Hick wanted to fry his boot in the deep fryer to see what would happen. Boot was caked in cow crap. He dropped it in. At this time, a customer was whining about not getting his french fries, said, "I didn't pay $47 to come into this park and stand in line all day." This was about 17 years ago now. Anyway, the hick farmer was getting annoyed with trying to tong his boot out of the fryer, then gets annoyed at the customer as well and puts the fries down. Fry basket right over the crap-caked boot. Cooked until golden brown and served up to the customer. That was my first day working at the park and my last day in food services. Forever. To this day, if I'm ever dragged to the park for whatever reason, I always avoid that chicken restaurant. I worked for an amusement park in Ohio for 2 summers, and the worst things I've seen are for the foods department. I personally watched a dozen french fries for one of the food stands fall off a pallet and get semi-crushed by the forklift tire, then get thrown back into the pallet to be served. They also had their entire food warehouse get closed down for a better part of the summer because of a bird infestation. The company salvaged what they could and threw it into refrigerated trailers to be served from. The summers I worked there were great, exhausting, and probably borderline illegal for the open-close shifts they had people working, going from 7 or 8 a.m. to maybe 12 a.m. or later. I wouldn't give up the friends I made there, but it could definitely have been better. Disney cast member here. We hate guests, we hate our job. The end. We're supposed to say, have a magical day, but it pretty much just means F you when dealing with rude people. What's the most unhinged gift that you've ever pretended to love? My parents found the Amazon wish list of someone with the same name as me, but not me. Thought it had a bunch of weird items, but decided to not check in with me or any other family member to see if they had the right list. And that's how I, as a 24-year-old male, got a maternity body pillow for Christmas. The same crock pot 3 years in a row from my ex-husband's mother. His new wife was gifted one last year. I'm certain that this woman has a pallet of crock pots stashed somewhere in her house. Once, when I was 18, my great-aunt found out I liked cats. So for Christmas, she got me a clip-on tail with matching ears. A girl I went to high school with and ended up taking college classes with wore them all throughout college. The class was on effective public speaking, and we had to write a paper and do a presentation on persuasion. We'd choose any topic to persuade someone into trying said topic. Her choice was on why you should be a furry. Maybe your aunt thought you were into that? My brother, maybe 11 at the time, took the wrapping paper off his gift from our grandmother. It was in a tape dispenser box, and cue everyone laughing. Oh, you got a tape dispenser. We got pretty quiet when it turned out to be a tape dispenser. Ugh. Lesbian Christmas. My parents thought I was a lesbian and wanted to be supportive. They gave me pink triangle earrings and poetry books by lesbians. I'm not gay. The very first holiday after my wedding, my mother-in-law sends my wife and I, each separately, the same self-help book on how to survive living with a hostile spouse. Not how to divorce or anything, but how to live in the relationship with an awful, bullying significant other. Not just to her, not just to me, to both of us. 2 copies of the same book. My sister bought me a CD she really wanted for herself. When I opened it, she said, "If you don't like it, I'll just take it." I didn't like it, but I kept it. Screw her. That is the sibling pettiness that most of us can relate to. I don't want it, but I'm going to keep it so that you don't get to enjoy it. But I'm not saying your sister didn't have that coming. Most of us really are just the worst at that age. I was a step-grandchild and my grandmother sold Avon to feed her QVC addiction. So while the other 6 grandchildren got real leather jackets, diamond jewelry, motocross lessons, and one year an actual motocross bike, I got plastic Avon jewelry. For reasons too long to list here, I got placed with my grandparents 2 weeks before Christmas when I was 16. I watched everyone open up their gifts, and then one aunt gave me a Walmart bag with some socks in it. Another one told me I should be grateful that the family was taking me in instead of leaving me on the street, and that was my present. 7 aunts and uncles and their spouses, along with my grandparents, and that's how they treated me in a situation that was out of my control. Needless to say, I don't talk to my family anymore. I used to be a little standoffish at work because I'm shy, sitting on my phone instead of socializing with coworkers. For the Secret Santa, I got my guy a nice bottle of bourbon because I knew that was something he'd like. I, in turn, got a book about how sitting on your phone too much makes you a jerk. When I was about 22, my mum somehow figured out I had a secret crush on Mark Wahlberg. All I got for Christmas that year were Mark Wahlberg DVDs. From everyone, in various boxes and wrappings, like so many Mark Wahlberg DVDs. I stopped saying, thanks, after probably the 5th one. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years now. Last Christmas, my aunt gave me a barbecue cookbook and told me it was because men won't date a woman who doesn't know how to cook them a steak. Joke's on you, Auntie Lisa. I'm not single because I'm a vegetarian, I'm single because I have a crap personality. When I was 18, my boyfriend's mum got me an Elmo live toy. I thought it was a gag gift, but it wasn't. My boyfriend got angry when I told him that no, I didn't love it. I didn't say that to his mum though, she was genuinely a very sweet woman. When I had my daughter, my grandmother arbitrarily decided that I was going to collect nutcrackers. Every year she gives us a new one. So now I have 13 creepy, 1.5 foot tall wooden men of various types in my living room for the whole of December. I hate them and fully believe that one day they'll rise up and murder me in my sleep. When my sister and I were younger, my dad liked to leave us a Christmas stocking full of small gifts, like novelties, candy, on our beds. This was very adorable until one year, for reasons unclear, he supplied us both with soft adult calendars, like Babes with No Tops for me, oiled up banana hammock wearing Chippendales for my 14 to 15-year-old sisters. After discreetly saying, "What the frick?" to each other on Christmas morning, we got rid of them, and for 20 years, they've never been mentioned by anyone involved. A hot pink sweater that was literally covered in sparkles with a little bow on it. I was 17 and I had to pretend to like it so I didn't hurt my aunt's feelings. When I was 12, I asked my mum for a pair of Converse. Instead of going for the basic ones, she got these checkered pink, red, blue ones that were just so horribly ugly. I pretended to like them, but then asked my mum later if we could exchange them. We did, although I still feel kind of bad. An industrial-sized jar of dill pickles. From my grandparents. The old Costco special, huh? A few years ago, my in-laws handed out their gifts to my wife and me and my wife's sister and her then boyfriend. I opened my gift and it was a, very large jar of Cajun seasoning. It was like the size you'd get at Costco. Huge. I was sort of confused because they gave their other daughter's boyfriend 3 to 4 t-shirts, a hat and a jacket from his favorite sports team, along with a gift card to a store he likes. And all they could come up with for me was a seriously huge jar of cooking seasoning? My father-in-law said he knew I liked to cook. I don't like to cook at all, by the way. And I got the impression that they just forgot to buy me anything or couldn't be bothered to come up with anything better. I really don't mind getting a weird gift or even no gift at all. But it hurts when it's so clearly obvious that they didn't care enough to even put a modicum of thought into it, while at the same time I see them buy such thoughtful gifts for their other daughter's boyfriend when I've been their son-in-law for 5 years at that point. I put the seasoning in their pantry before we left to go home. My dad gifted me his old phone when he upgraded. I guess it could have been an okay gift as I had an older phone that I wanted to upgrade, but I just wasn't in a hurry or prioritizing buying a new one. It was the same damn phone I had, and it was more beat up than mine. I was also 30 with the clear ability to upgrade if I wanted to. My uncle gave me a hat once, back in my low to mid-teens. It wasn't an awful hat, but certainly not one I'd ever wear. I felt really bad laughing at it, thinking it was a gag gift, since it clearly made my uncle sad. He's only given me gift cards since. It was years ago, but it still makes me feel awful. So my family makes this our theme. Instead of Merry Christmas, we have Happy Crappy Christmas. Basically, instead of spending hundreds of dollars on gifts we don't know if the other person will like, we just buy dollar store and wish gifts that we're fairly certain the recipient won't like, but we laugh at the idea of it. Last year, I think my sister won when she bought us cheap Chinese butthole bleaching kits. My sister-in-law gives us salt and pepper shakers. The uglier, the better. We have about 10 pairs now. She buys them at yard sales. Usually it's some long-grown kid's school art project, 2 walnuts glued together with googly eyes, and a salt shaker drilled in, 2 psychedelic mushrooms, and 2 very deformed cats. One of the recent videos I did on the channel featured some rather surprisingly habitual salt and pepper shaker thieves, most of whom were described as being older ladies. I wonder if we've had one of them appear in 2 videos in a row. That would be incredible. Also, crappy gift. The same box of specially spiced tea that I gave to my mum the year before. I tried to unload it to my sister-in-law the year after that. My family always did the post office Christmas gift donation thing. You know, the one where you get a kid's age and gender to buy them gifts. Well, even on Social Security, my dad would give us the choice to do it, even if it meant us getting less. I loved it. I always looked forward to it. My mum remarries and her new husband thinks it's a great idea to sign us up to receive gifts from the program, and I've never felt so ashamed. I think I felt guilty because it felt like I was taking someone's Christmas from them. I kept asking my mum if we're going to do it that year, and when she finally drives us to the post office, I got excited to pick out a name. She drives to the back and instead picks up 3 bags of presents. 3 bags for 2 kids? I was mortified. When I finally opened the presents, they acted like they got them for us. I wasn't allowed to be ungrateful, however, because the people who got me presents went all out. A really warm coat and a soft as frick blanket, art supplies, really nice ones. That helped me get over myself, but I still feel crappy today. As a teacher, a can of shaving cream and a mini razor. I guess that did get used, though, unlike the 57 mugs I received. A queen-sized top sheet, like for your bed. There was no fitted sheet to go with it, and I didn't have a queen-sized bed. A book on beating alcoholism and a book on losing weight. Oh, you know what? Screw you, Aunt Ruth. An ugly homemade felt Santa head. It looked like someone hunted Santa down, shot him, and mounted his head on the wall. It became my favorite Christmas decoration. My sister always buys me joke gifts. The coolest one was a Chinese bootleg Thomas the Tank Engine Voltron. The most what the frick one was a gourd. A jar of peanut butter that was already open. God bless you, Grandma. After a horrible breakup, I got drunk one Christmas morning, went to my room to get my roommate her gift, and came back with an open jar of peanut butter and a half-eaten cracker. I was mortified when I sobered up. My roommate insisted on keeping the peanut butter. My grandmother sent me a pink dress in a size 8 with cutaway shoulders one year. I was a 16-year-old boy. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife still receives a little kid's coloring book and crayons every year from her one grandpa and his wife for Christmas. She made the mistake of telling him that she liked to color when she was 8. A year ago, my mum got me a small, novelty-size butter churn for Christmas. It's not pretty, it's not an art piece, and it has no decorative value. The same year, she got my younger brother a Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild. One time, my aunt was on the wrong combination of medicines, and yes, she did eventually correct it, but while she was on the cocktail, she gave my brother and I gift bags that had a single clementine and 2 unsharpened pencils apiece. The first Christmas that my girlfriend, now wife, and I spent with my parents, we were opening gifts in my living room, and my mum gave me a vibrating Johnson ring as a stocking stuffer. When I was 14 or 15, I told my mum that I really liked Andes mints. Every year since then, I get Andes mints. I stopped being crazy about them when I was about 20 or so. I have a stack of several years of boxes going until I finally made my husband take it to work to give it away. Snow shovel from my grandparents for my 13th birthday. They said I could use it to make money and buy whatever I wanted. Well, they weren't wrong. My cat bought me a quail once. Did you eat it? That's one heck of a gift from your feline friend there. My brother bought me a body-sized male contraceptive and labeled it, "To the biggest member in the world." I got him a sweet clock that had backwards numbers and turned counterclockwise. We didn't really get along back then. My dad gave me an air compressor. It was about waist high, the size of a mini fridge, the kind that you might have in your garage. Except I didn't have a garage because I was living in an apartment and I had nowhere to put it. I've moved since then, but I still don't have a garage or anywhere to put the thing. So it's sitting unopened in my friend's garage until I can find a better use for it. I'm not at all religious, but that didn't stop my father from giving me an 18-inch tall statue of Jesus. I forgot it in a box in a storage room in his basement when I left. Last year, I went through a pretty crappy breakup that kept being dragged through me and my ex being off and on for a while. I started to feel better around Christmas, but still woke up that morning and opened my stocking to find that Santa, my mum, had gifted me a mold-your-own-boyfriend kit out of clay. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I did spend a nice evening molding an absolute stud, though. Well, it sounds like it was at least a fun distraction for an evening during a tough time. Arts and crafts are good for this when we're feeling blue. They take up just enough of our brains to placehold for the mind-numbing grief. My in-laws, parents and siblings, all got me pajamas. The issue was when I opened the first set, they said, "Since you sleep so much." What the frick? Clowns. Every year, a new clown. I tried to tell my abuelito that I don't like clowns, they're weird. I get a new clown figurine, doll, lamp, picture, or whatever every year for Christmas and my birthday. I have boxes of clowns. Thankfully, sometime in my mid-20s, my father managed to divert them to kittens, but that was only after 4 awkward years when he decided I love cows. I don't love cows either. On the bright side, since I kept all of them on my dresser growing up, I was never afraid of clowns. They're just background noise to me. I could probably walk right into Stephen King's It and just be all like, "Oh, it's just one more damn clown." My grandmother decided it would be a good idea to gift my sister and my cousin, also a girl, matching lingerie last year for Christmas. The problem being that my cousin was 7 at the time. We still laugh about it when my grandma isn't around. My aunt gave me a banana case. Yes, a yellow plastic thing to put a banana in and protect it from the world. The next year, it was an apple case. For our first Christmas together, my boyfriend gave me this beautifully wrapped Christmas gift. I opened it in front of his entire family, and it was the ugliest pair of shoes I've ever seen, like grandmother slipper clogs. The look on my face told everyone how I really felt, even though I said how much I liked them. They burst out laughing as it was a prank, and my boyfriend had another gift hiding. Even to this day, when my wife and I make pretty decent money, my grandmother, a 96-year-old, still writes us a check for $15 every Christmas. It's very kind of her, but not as awesome to receive in your 30s as it was when I was 12. My grandma decides how much she wants to spend at Christmas and then divides that number by the number of cousins, which keeps growing since my southern cousins are baby machines. Last year, my Christmas check was for $13. Oh, and 46 cents. My neighbor gave me a rather crude painting of myself being run over by his crappy, horrible Bronco. In 2006 for Christmas, I gave my then-fiancée a $450 hand-carved artist's easel. She gave me a 4-pack of Ferrero Rocher chocolates. A large box of Johnnies from my grandma because she overheard me and my ex going at it while she was visiting for the holidays, and walked in on us in the heat of the moment. Thankfully, the lights were off, but yeah, it was awkward and hilarious at the same time. Quality beats quantity. I once had a girlfriend that gifted me about 12 to 15 items of clothing from Goodwill. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with this in principle. For instance, trying to save money, but it just made no sense because 1, this girl didn't hurt for money at all, and 2, several of the items had stains or other damage. And finally, by getting so many things, she spent more than she would have for one new item of clothing. It was easily the worst gift I've ever received. An avocado. My girlfriend, now wife, used to complain that I bought Annie's organic macaroni. Her parents once bought me a Costco pack of Kraft so she could have good macaroni. I got a seal clubbing nutcracker from a well-meaning family friend. They thought the seal was a pet and the guy was just petting it with his club. Ugh. When we were younger, my grandmother would always give the grandkids a bag full of random stuff. We'd get things like pajamas, fuzzy socks, a stationery set, and things like that, but every year, without fail, she'd always throw in a package of undies. Of course, we'd all act excited and thank our grandmother, but we were still kids unwrapping underwear for Christmas. My grandmother is the sentimental type and also wanted all of us to take turns showing everyone what we got. Usually, we didn't show off our undies, but my grandmother would always say, "I think there's something else. Show everyone what you got." So for Christmas, we had to hold up the undies for our aunts and uncles to see and for whoever else was there for Christmas. She stopped giving us undies once the oldest grandkids started becoming preteens. Looking back, all of us find it hilarious and I'll probably remember it for the rest of my life. My grandmother was just trying to get us something we'd actually use, whether we wanted it for Christmas or not. And being a kid, underwear is definitely a, thanks moment. My husband has relatives who work in a thrift store, so the entire family gets some really weird presents for them. I got a used nightgown, like what grandmas would wear. It was white, but it had turned yellow from age, and it smelled musty too. A stained incense stick holder with some incense sticks in a package that was already opened, a collection of china plates with stains, a shirt so big I could swim in it, a lightly used bottle of perfume that was pretty much eau de mothballs. I just donated them right back to another thrift store. When I was about 10, my grandfather bought me a BB gun for Christmas. Obviously, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world then, but my parents were very uncomfortable with it. And looking back at it, buying a 10-year-old as immature as I was a BB gun was probably not a great idea. With regards to your uncle, he probably knew that you'd think of him as the most awesome uncle ever after that, even if your parents took that thing off you. Some very obviously second-hand cassette tapes of whale music. I've had some amazing ones from my mother-in-law. A how to cook pasta book, a ceramic hen, one candle in a gift box that clearly originally had 2 candles in it, a pasta measurer shaped like a cowboy, and my absolute favorite, chocolate-covered nuts. I'm allergic to nuts and I have an EpiPen. I've had 4 anaphylactic shocks in my life. My husband nearly had a heart attack when I opened that present. In the early 1990s, I got 3 fanny packs from 3 different relatives. A single pair of see-through pink lacy undies for my first Christmas I spent with my boyfriend's, now husband's, family. They were from his 86-year-old step-grandmother. I was 19 at the time and absolutely mortified, but tried to play it off like it was a hilarious gag gift. And I forget to mention, my husband just reminded me, that the panties were 3 times XL. And yes, I've got some extra winter cushion, but I'm not a big human being. It would take a lot to get me to fit a 3 times XL. So last year, my dad was short on money for Christmas. I took him shopping to buy stuff for everyone else, and he said he was going to pay me back. He never actually pays back what he borrows, and at the end he asked to borrow money for one more gift he needed to get. I gave him the money and he bought me a gift card. It was to a restaurant I like, but he literally took my money and put it into a less usable form. Remington electric razor specifically designed for black men. My dear grandmother bought it for me. It even said Black Men Razor and had a black dude smiling on the package. I'm about as white as it gets, always have been, probably always will be. Who knows, maybe you're just a late bloomer. Last year, my uncle and aunt got my boyfriend and I a giant white piggy bank with colorful baby symbols around it, to start saving for the baby. We're not married, we're in our early 20s, no baby on the horizon in the near future. It was a bit odd to say the least. Someone sent me a homemade miniature catapult for Reddit Secret Santa. What are they doing? The trebuchet is clearly the superior siege weapon. What insane thing did someone think was completely normal in their house? I knew a girl who'd get glasses of water, and whenever she couldn't finish the whole thing, she'd just dump the rest on the carpet because it's fine, it just absorbs it. I went to high school with a girl whose family would dress up their house like a model home being sold or something. For example, the dining room table was dressed with a plastic Thanksgiving feast with plastic food on nice plates and fake wine in fake glasses. When you walked into her bedroom, the bed was made with top corners open as if she had just got out of bed, and there was a tray with a fake bowl of cereal and a fake glass of orange juice. On the floor were coloring books and crayons as if a child lived in the room. They kept the place spotless, and every room had an odd theme of fake living. Her parents' bedroom had quite a few large African animal statues and fake rose petals leading to the bed. People actually get paid to live in model homes or homes for sale. They have to keep them immaculately clean and ready to be shown at any time. Maybe that's what happened. When I moved cities in grade 2 or 3, I didn't know anyone. I met someone the first day and he invited me to his house that weekend to stay over. Everything was great. We played GameCube and stayed up until 3 a.m., the latest I'd been awake to up at that point in my life. He said we had to sleep down in the basement so we don't wake his parents when we went upstairs. We go downstairs with our sleeping bags and immediately I knew something was wrong. The worst smell I've ever experienced filled my nostrils the further we descended. In the corner of the room was a bed covered in what looked like crusty blood and some pus-colored streaks. Turns out his mother had had a home birth the weeks before and kept the sheets as a memento. I haven't been back there since. You'd think the baby would be a good enough memento. Whole items of food left for days on the floor. Toddler not interested in that apple? That's fine. Just leave it there on the floor where he threw it. It'll work its way under a piece of furniture and out of sight if we give it some time. Once I went to these people's houses and there was an entire sandwich sitting in the corner of the living room floor. I was so distracted by it that I didn't really hear much of what was said during that visit. I just sat and stared at the floor witch. Well, that's how you get ants, and roaches, and mice, and rats, and I don't know what else. Truly revolting. I don't know how the author didn't mention the smell. Maybe these people did occasionally do a covert cleanup? I was friends with my Little League baseball coach's son. One day I was invited to their house for a playdate, and as I walked through the door I saw a huge framed white cloth with some weird symbol. I didn't think much about it because at the time I didn't know what the frick it was. My coach noticed me looking at it as I entered the house and said, my granddad wore that. It's been in the family for years. Naturally, I was like, oh, okay, whatever, and thought nothing of it ever again. Now that I'm older, I realize what it was. It was a clan robe. The worst part is that I am not white. When my brother and I were kids, we'd often comment that our next-door neighbor's house smelled like wee-wee. One day, my brother was playing video games with the kid from next door at his house and asked to use the restroom. The kid said, we just pee here, and started peeing in the closet. My brother peed in there too. When in Rome. Bathroom machete. Because, just in case, man. It's literally nothing more than a real machete that hangs in their bathroom, so if someone breaks in while you're fighting dirt dragons, you aren't at a total disadvantage. Everyone there was surprised when I said I'd never heard of it. I now keep a bathroom hammer handy because gosh darn it, that's a great idea. I had a friend in high school. Went to his house for the first time and everything smelled like wee-wee. Turns out he had a dog and his family never bothered to potty train or clean up after it. Everything in the house was covered in old dried-up wee-wee and fresh puddles. While I was there, the dog wee-weed on my friend's bed and he didn't even care. He literally sleeps in his dog's number 1. Even I got wee-weed on. Never went to that house again. We were getting something out of his dad's closet when I noticed there was a ton of expensive electrical equipment in the back of it, all boxed up. I asked him about it. Apparently, his dad keeps everything new he gets for a year before he unboxes it and actually uses it. He didn't know why, and it still boggles my mind. The extent to which the owners had gone to preserve their furniture. Each piece of furniture, including the lampshades, had a custom-cut plastic shell draped over it. Every furniture leg had a plastic bowl underneath to distribute weight across the carpet, preventing indents. The strangest part was the plastic pathways laid out across the floor. These pathways were kind of like plastic carpets laid on top of the real carpet. You weren't allowed to walk on the actual carpet. Instead, you had to walk on these plastic mats that crisscrossed the floor and connected all of the rooms to each other. My friend's dad. When I was a kid, I used to stay for dinner, as kids do, but the dad would not eat with us. The mum would make a plate of food, take it down the hall and slide it halfway under the door to the basement. A few seconds later, the plate would slowly slide under the door. Nobody at the house seemed to think this was odd, but I thought it was weird as all heck. The other odd thing that this family did was every weeknight at 7, on the dot, the family would clear out of the living room so the dad could come and watch Star Trek. Once the show was over, he'd go back into the basement and the family would move back into the living room. Fricking what? The dad was quiet, but seemed to be normal other than those odd habits. The family thought none of that was weird, and my friend thought it was funny that my dad ate with us at dinner. I came here to mention the friends who kept their bread in the oven, but clearly I'm out of my league. We had a human skull in a glass case in our living room growing up. It was years before I figured out that was really weird. My mum got it from a doctor friend or something, just some random head, not like a relative or anything. We call him Freddy, and we had to superglue his jaw back on every few years when it fell off. I guess I'd repressed the memories, but just typing this now, I recall touching it and playfully tossing it around gently at times. I'm torn between wanting to respect the dead and really wanting that skull. A 5-year-old in diapers. I was an adult literacy volunteer and I went to this couple's trailer. A kid walks in shirtless, wearing a diaper. At first I thought it was a joke, then I thought maybe developmental issues. Then the mother says, "About time to change a diaper, ain't it?" And the kid said defiantly, "You ain't gonna change my diaper." My friend's mum often threatened to murder the whole family when she was angry. This was very scary to me, but my friend hardly thought anything of it. She just acts like that was normal mum stuff. That's the kind of threat you never actually want to call out or play chicken with. You can't go telling them to put their money where their mouth was. That lady probably needed help on a serious note. I went to a friend's house and they had their halls lined with grandfather clocks. This was a little weird, but nothing major. The weird part came when his dad told me and my friend, "Don't you kids go around telling anyone about my clocks." Now I'll never forget about his precious, precious clocks. I'll never forget as a child visiting my friend's house and noticing the wallpaper they had in his hallways. The pattern was of undressed women. Throughout his apartment, just little au naturel women all over the wall. We were maybe 8 years old and it was amazing. A cow tongue in place of a birthday cake. It wasn't like they couldn't afford a birthday cake either. They just had a cow tongue with a single candle in it. I knew a guy one time who'd get completely undressed every time he took a number 2, and then take a shower afterwards to really clean up. He'd even do this at other people's houses. I was about 12 or 13, visiting my best friend's house for the first time. After lunch, I get the urge to take a number 2. So I go to the restroom, do my thing, finish up, and flush. Nothing. Nothing happens. I take a step back and flush again. Still nothing. So I start freaking the F out. I'm a kid, I just broke my friend's toilet, I don't have any money to pay for it or buy a new one. I'm standing there sweating, trying to figure out a plan, and after 15 minutes, I've still got nothing. I finally decide to fess up. I mean, I can't stay there all day, can I? They'll eventually figure out something is wrong, right? I step outside and sheepishly tell his mum that I broke the toilet. She starts laughing, goes into the bathroom, turns on the water flow to the toilet, waits a few minutes, and then flushes. Easy peasy. Everyone, the best friend, his mum, and his sister, then takes the opportunity to start laughing at me because I didn't know it was normal to turn the water on and off whenever I needed to use the bathroom. To this day, if I'm unfamiliar with a restroom, I always do a precautionary flush just to make sure everything is working the way it should. One summer when I was about 13, a friend of mine had a friend from her school that invited us over to go swimming in her pool. We go to her place and we were shown her room to change in. As I'm changing, my friend suddenly whispers, "What the frick?" And I turn around to see a bunch of used sanitary pads lined up on this girl's desk. She comes to join us in her room, and my friend flat out asks her what those are all about. She says very plainly, "Oh, they're for my dad so he can check that I'm not pregnant." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I dated a guy whose family was just odd. They did things so differently. Sometimes I wondered if they might be aliens. No one in the house knew how to use a stove. They used the microwave or ate out. Every cabinet and drawer in the house was always wide open, like they had no idea you could close them. The rest of the house was clean and organized, which made it all a stranger. His mother walked around pretty much undressed constantly and took about 10 baths a day. His parents would go to McDonald's to watch TV, despite having a very nice TV with satellite. His family had a lot of grandiose tales, things like they saved 2 men from a plane crash and how the mother outran a pack of wolves in suburban Arizona. There is a lot more, but these were what stuck in my mind. Spent the night at a friend's house in the 6th grade. He lived with just his mum, dad wasn't in the picture, and he was an only child, so they had a close relationship. We were having a great time until his mum called him for bath time. With her. Like together. They even left the door open like it was nothing. Girl from my previous work invited some of us over for dinner. As it turns out, she had removed the toilet seating from her toilet. Because it doesn't look good enough with it on. You actually had to sit on the thin, cold ceramic rim. Since people have said this isn't uncommon in certain countries, this took place in Germany where toilets always have seats. I had a friend in high school whose family used a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier as a coffee table. I had one of those as a kid. It was so huge that my dad rigged a setup where it hung from my ceiling and he'd get it down for us to play with. One time after school, my friend and I tried to get it down with a broom and one side came unhooked. It knocked my poor friend out cold. He wasn't allowed over after that. Paramedic here, 100 2-liter soda bottles filled with wee-wee because, quote, the toilet is broken. But where was he going number 2? Where was he doing that? Maybe he was just supremely good at holding it in until he got to work or the library or whatever. In any case, gross. No way that you fill that many bottles without a substantial amount of splashback over time. I had a friend named David and he invited me to his house once. Little did I know that his family were horrific hoarders. You couldn't see the floor of his house and I was literally stepping in bowls filled with cereal. At one point I saw a snake just slither through the refuse and immediately made up an excuse that I was sick so I could go home. What a nightmare! My parents were in a bowling league and would bring me home with them. I made friends with a girl who hung out at the bowling alley because she lived in a home on an acre next to it. She invited me to come to her house while my parents bowled. I asked my parents and they said I could. She walked to her house and when I walked in there was a lion cub chained to a coffee table in the back room. She asked me if I wanted to pet the lion. Of course I did. I pet the lion, we hang out, I go back to the bowling alley like nothing happened. I told my parents and they're like, sure kid, you pet a lion. Years later, when I am reading the paper, the girl and her family were being arrested for illegally having exotic cats. I showed my parents and had the best I told you so moment in my life. Not me, but when my dad was younger, he went to a friend's house who had a hallway filled with au naturel family pictures. One of my wife's coworkers invited us to a dinner party. He's a very accomplished doctor who is supposedly considered the foremost authority in his specialty. I knew the man had a huge ego, but nothing prepared me for what I saw when we went to his home. As soon as we walked in the door, there was a life-sized painting of himself that one of his patients had given him as a gift. Nothing strange about that. He saved a patient's life and they were very grateful, so they gave him a painting. His wife took our jackets, hung them up, then walked us to his massive living room where the rest of the guests are mingling. As I looked around the room to take in what a magnificent home this man has, I noticed there were hundreds of pictures lining his shelves and walls. Every single one of those pictures was of him. Not of his wife, not of his 4 wonderful kids, nor his siblings, parents, or someone he admires. Even the pictures that looked like they might have been group photos were cropped so that only he could be seen. I'm terrible at hiding my true feelings. My face usually gives me away every time, but I spent the next hour desperately trying to pretend like this wasn't remotely strange. After a few drinks, I decided to head to the bathroom. I had to take a dump, and I'm not shy about doing so at another person's home. I walked into their guest bathroom, closed the door, lifted up the lid, sat down, and grabbed one of a dozen books that were sitting next to the John. The first book I picked up is written by our host, so I picked up a different one, and it was also written by him. I looked at the bookends, and all of them were written by our host. Partly amused and partly disgusted, I looked up and noticed that there's a picture on a small table across from the toilet. It's him again, staring at me in the picture while I'm taking a dump. And no one mentioned the pictures to him. Also, I'm 100% certain it wasn't a troll or practical joke. In short, I went to someone's home, and it was basically an enormous shrine to themselves. I was visiting one friend, and we were about to go buy a 30 rack at a nearby liquor store. I tell him that we need to stop by an ATM so I can pick up some cash to pay. He just turns and looks at me and goes, "Don't worry about it, we can just go to the money drawer." This kid's family literally kept a drawer full of $20 bills in the kitchen that you could just walk up and grab whenever you needed something. It was pretty surreal. When I was in college, I played the drums in a band, and we'd often practice at the guitar player's house, because his parents didn't care about the noise. The family was weird and the house smelled, but the thing that got me was the filth. There was always dog doo somewhere, and I don't think they ever flushed or cleaned a toilet. All of this was considered normal to them. Then one day the guy that played guitar walked over to the corner of the room and went wee-wee on the floor. I was stunned. He wasn't drunk or anything like that. This was normal to him. His parents didn't care either. It was just how they did things. My friend refuses to vacuum, and her carpet is covered in a layer of loose hair. I met this kid in 3rd grade, and he seemed normal. Cool kid. Funny. Anyway, I went to his house to work on a school project, and his mother was a hoarder. Worst of the worst. She could have had a marathon of the hoarders on her own home. I guess the kid thought it was normal because he had been living in it since he was born. He was kind of disheartened when he came to my house and didn't have to climb over mounds of trash to take a leak. Dog crap. Old, crusty, all alongside the fresh and smelly pit bull crap all over the living room, while he'd just sit and watch TV in the room as if it wasn't even there. Yes, this was my house. Yes, this was my roommate. I'd pick it up, let the dog out to try housebreaking it. He did nothing. As I packed up my stuff to move out, I stopped picking up the dog doo, thinking that he'd man up. Nope, I had to step around these massive landmines as I moved out. This is like my 3rd submission for the question, and it's become clear to me I know some pretty dysfunctional people. Oh boy, pal, I don't normally judge the people who submit here. That's for our other channel, Am I the Jerk? But maybe you need to start getting new friends. Unless all of these crazies in your life are also super affluent and paying for everything, then maybe you can keep one of them around. A white carpeted kitchen. Once when I was a kid, I was invited to stay over for dinner at a friend's house. My friend's mother poured a large quantity of ketchup into a cereal bowl, which the entire family all casually dipped their fingers into and licked throughout the meal. This sounds like something out of the Twilight Zone. They were testing you. I was invited over to a friend's house for dinner for the first time. Now, for staging purposes, they all sit around the living room to eat as a family. They have these 2 large dogs, so I asked beforehand, as I always do, what are the rules with dogs and food? Am I supposed to ignore begging? Can I give them a bite? What kind of stuff can I feed them? Do they have a trick to get some? They tell me that not only can I feed them whatever I want, but that all plates are given to the dogs after the meal, and the dogs would hassle you if you took the plate straight to the kitchen. So I finished my meal, which was decent, and I laid down my plate for the dogs. They clean it up quite nicely. I pick it up to the kitchen, and I ask if it goes to the sink or the dishwasher. They said to put it back in the cabinet because the dogs clean it good enough to eat off of. I laughed at the joke and then kind of reiterated my question. It wasn't a joke. My friend walked into the kitchen and put her plate, her boyfriend's plate, and her mum and dad's plate all in the cabinet with the other, quote, clean dishes. I could have been sick. I dropped all contact with them. That was just too much. In short, their dishwashing was done exclusively by the dogs. This was when I was a kid. I was at my friend's house and her mum got us some orange juice with our lunch. When we finished eating, she took the remaining juice from the cups and poured it back into the container. Even as a kid, I thought it was disgusting. Kids in the home going to the fridge, grabbing a stick of butter, unwrapping it, taking a big old bite, rewrapping it, and putting it back. Went to a party in college and the kid living there had boxes of Cat Fancy magazine catalogued by month and year all over his room. When I asked about it, the dude just shrugged and said, I'm into cats. I was just too nervous to ask more. They keep a sewing needle and pin stuck into their hand towel. I found it by reaching to use the hand towel to dry my hands and putting the pin through my finger. I was like, what the frick, guys? And they just shrugged as in, you don't have sharp objects hiding in your towels? They then went on to explain that it was used for draining pimples. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.